All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the Howell Township's Mayor and Council Workshop Meeting, May 2nd, 2006. The time is 7:20. Mr. Davis, would you please read the opening statement and call the roll?
Yes, sir. Let the minutes reflect that adequate notice of the holding of this workshop meeting of the Howell Township Council was provided for in the following manner. By the posting of copy of said notice upon the bulletin board in the Township Municipal Building on December 21st, 2005, and by the faxing of a copy of said notice to the Asbury Park Press, Tri-Town News, and Star Ledger for publication on December 21st, 2005, and by the filing of a copy of said form of notice in the Township Clerk's office on December 21st, 2005. Public will be allowed to attend and will be allowed to participate pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Law. Public is reminded that civility and decorum will be maintained during the meeting. Any contracts awarded at this meeting or between now and the next meeting will be required to comply with the requirements of the public laws of 1975, Chapter 127, NJAC 17:27. In accordance with the Fire Prevention Code, be advised that this facility is designed with 3 emergency exits for your safety. The locations are as follows. Upon exiting the meeting room to the rear, they are to immediate left and immediate right, and at the front of the meeting room at the left of the dais. Furthermore, smoking is not permitted in the municipal building. Please take note that this meeting is being videotaped for future broadcast on Howell Township TV 77.
Roll call, Mr. Malavey.
Here.
Mr. Showmaker.
Here.
Mr. Tabasco.
Present.
Mr. Walsh.
Here.
Mayor DeBella.
Here. Okay, we will do the Pledge of Allegiance when we come back out into our regular session. Mr. Davis, I understand we have reason to go into executive session. Is that right, sir?
Yes, sir.
Would you please read the appropriate statement?
Whereas Title 10, Chapter 4, Section 13 of the New Jersey Revised Statutes require that the public shall not be excluded from any meetings of a public body unless a resolution authorizing such exclusion is adopted at a public meeting. And whereas the Township Council of the Township of Howell has determined that such a closed meeting is required to discuss certain matters which are exempted from consideration with the public in attendance under New Jersey Revised Statutes 10:4-12, namely personnel matters and acquisition of property. Now therefore be it resolved by the Township Council of the Township of Howell that the public shall be excluded from the next portion of this meeting, and the Township Council will reconvene in public session thereafter. Be it further resolved that minutes will be kept of the meeting in closed session, and the time, the circumstances under which the discussion conducted in closed session can be disclosed to the public cannot be determined at this time. Need a motion and second, Mayor.
So moved.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. Remarks, Mr. Chesky? Okay, there's also a contract issue. Did the motioner and seconder agree?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Any additional comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Malavey.
Yes.
Mr. Showmaker.
Yes.
Mr. Tabasco.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
Mayor DeBella.
Yes, we expect to be back in public session at approximately 8 p.m. Thank you. Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to reconvene the meeting to order. Let the record reflect this is a continuation of the meeting we started earlier. The Howell Township Mayor and Council, our May 2nd workshop meeting. I welcome everyone to the meeting. We've already had our opening statement. We've had a roll call. We are now going to please have a Pledge of Allegiance. Everyone please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd ask that everyone please remain standing for a moment. Silent thought and observation for the troops that are defending this country all across the globe. Thank you. I'm going to ask the council to please join me in the front of the room for 2 presentations. Penny. Excuse me, Penny. Where's the mic? No? I'll talk louder. Okay, good. I'll hold on to what others. We have 2 special awards we're going to be giving out this evening. First, I'd like to call up Eagle Scout Thomas Smith and his Scout Master, who's also, I believe, his father, Mr. Smith and Mr. Smith. Welcome, gentlemen. Howell has had a wonderful tradition of having a number of fine young men reach the position of Eagle Scout, which is the highest award that someone can work and achieve in scouting. It's not an award that comes without a tremendous amount of hard work, and Eagle Scout Smith had his ceremony last week. Unfortunately, I had a family issue and I was not able to be there with him, but because of the extraordinary achievement that he has been able to realize. We wanted to recognize him nonetheless here in front of the full mayor and council, and for all those who might be watching on cable television. So this may work out to your benefit that we actually did it here tonight. Before we give this award to Eagle Scout Smith, perhaps, Mr. Smith, you can share with us your community project that you had to do to fulfill and get your final award for the Eagle Scout rank.
I worked at the PAL building, the Police Athletic League. I painted 3 murals on there and built 2 benches there. The murals were of design of athletes. They were making various different sports at the Police Athletic League, and one mural was their new PAL logo, which I hand painted with no stencils involved. Yeah.
How many years have you been in scouting altogether?
12? 14? 14.
Well, it's an extraordinary accomplishment. Anytime someone reaches the position of Eagle Scout, there are very few people that actually get to that particular rank, and there have been some extraordinary people that have been to that or have achieved that rank. Among them, former presidents, Steven Spielberg, the great movie producer. So there have been some very, very distinguished and important people that have attained that extraordinary achievement. And in fact, I've often tell this to Eagle Scouts that even in my regular employment, when I'm interviewing a candidate to join the firm, one of the things that I'll look for on the resume is Eagle Scout, because that is a distinction of someone that has tremendous discipline and character and integrity, and it is a mark of maturity. So the fact that Thomas is from our community really brings great distinction and great honor. And the virtues that I would say that you have learned and picked up in scouting, you'll carry with you for the rest of your life. I was a scout for a while. I got to the rank of life and discovered girls, and it was all downhill from there. So you really are to be commended for having the perseverance to really get to the top of the mountain. And in recognition of this extraordinary achievement, we present you with our Eagle Scout Award to Thomas Smith in recognition of outstanding service rendered to the Township of Howell. It was originally dated the evening of your presentation, which was April the 26th, has the seal of the Township of Howell, and it's presented by myself, Mayor Joseph M. DeBella, on behalf of Councilman Walsh, Councilman Malave, Councilwoman Showmaker, and Deputy Mayor Tabasco. Congratulations. Much success for all that you do.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
I'll ask the council to please stay up here. Oftentimes, people who serve the community serve, they do their business, they do so dignified, they do so sometimes very quietly, and then when their time has come, they move on to the next chapter in their lives. And oftentimes, we let people go without saying thank you. And so when I heard that Mr. Kraft had moved on to the next level, I'm not going to call it that it wasn't a favorable outcome, because the person I know, Terry Kraft, is a winner. But because he was ready to move on to the next chapter in his life, I felt it was important that the council recognize him for his many, many years of extraordinary participation in so many things dealing with Howell Township. We're pleased to have with Mr. Terry Kraft, come on up, Mr. Kraft, the Honorable Terry Kraft. We have Jim Wasser, who is the superintendent of the Freehold Regional School System. We have his daughter, Stephanie. We have Mrs. Kraft, and we have Mr. Kraft's mother, Marion, who is a Howell resident, as I recall. So we're very fortunate to have your family here with us this evening, and I'd like to read a proclamation from the office of mayor to the Honorable Terry Kraft. Whereas Terry Kraft has been a dedicated public servant for nearly a quarter century, serving the residents of Howell Township as a member of the local Board of Education, and for 10 years, and more recently having spent the last 15 years as a member of the Freehold Regional Board of Education. And whereas throughout his tenure, Mr. Kraft worked tirelessly on behalf of the students and residents of Howell Township, and later for all of those that participate in the Freehold Regional Board of Education. Over the course of his illustrious career, he gave countless hours of his time in contributing to making our educational system better for the young people, taking time away from his profession and his personal affairs. And whereas Mr. Kraft was instrumental in a broad range of issues that have had a profound impact on the Freehold Regional Board of Education. Mr. Kraft was chairman of the Regional Land Search Committee, was instrumental in working for the needed additions to all 6 high schools in the region, supported the expansion of the learning centers and the academy expansions, and was a driving force in the expanded use of technology in all aspects of the regional district's operation and curriculum. And whereas locally, Mr. Kraft was also instrumental in helping the local Howell Board of Education become a great education system it is today. And serving from 1982 to 1992, Mr. Kraft was the board's president in 1984. He was vice president in 1983 and again in 1987. He served on a variety of important committees, including Buildings and Grounds, Community Affairs, Facilities, and Education. He also served as a delegate and alternate delegate to the New Jersey School Boards Association. And whereas Mr. Kraft served with distinction and integrity, always placing the benefit of others over himself while working to ensure that every child got the best possible educational experience. Now, therefore, be it resolved that in light of his near 25 years of exceptional public service to the Township of Howell, that the Township of Howell recognizes and pays tribute to the most honorable gentleman and Honorable Terry Kraft for his wonderful service and dedication to our community. It's signed May 2nd, 2006, by myself, Mayor Joseph M. DeBella, on behalf of the entire Township Council. Mr. Kraft, we owe you a great deal of gratitude. Very much. Congratulations. Thank you.
I just wanted to say a couple words. I can tell I have some friends in the back. Evelyn and I shared some times together, Sue, and so forth. It's just great to have my family here, the people I love the most. I spent 9 to 10 years in this room because we used to hold our local board meetings here, and then after leaving there, obviously spent some time over at the high school. I have the honor of having my name on a number of buildings in the surrounding area, some high schools, some elementary schools. But the biggest legacy of all is really the ability for our students here in Howell and the rest of the district to be able to have opportunities that they can't have elsewhere. And the charge that I leave my colleagues with and administrators is to make sure that those opportunities expand. And it's a very difficult thing because of the monetary constraints that we have today. But we've been able to do it over a long period of time, and I have faith in the folks that I've left behind that should be able to continue a wonderful education for our children. Thank you very much.
Oh, gee. I'm not going there.
I did.
Good night. Good to see you. All right, let's get back to our regular agenda. I will call the council's attention to item 5. This is a report of township officials. Mr. Chernetsky, sir, we'll start with you.
Can you hear me?
No.
Can you hear me now? Okay, just 3 brief matters. First, I'd just like pleased to announce that all approvals have been received for the Bonham. All approvals have been received for the Bonham Park, and the irrigation system has been delivered, and some grading work will start shortly. We received a number of calls, people concerned that we were installing sewers. We are not.
Bonham.
Yes, we are not. We are installing an irrigation system. The other item I'd like to announce, and was sort of encouraged by Councilwoman Showmaker to start a dialogue with the library. And Ms. Trotter, Janet Trotter, the head librarian, attended my department head meeting, or our department head meeting, excuse me, on Monday. and I think we're off to a good start with the library. One of the things that they agreed to do for us, and I think this addresses one of the concerns with respect to the proposal to have a DVD fee for council meetings, is we'll be forwarding a copy of the council meetings in a DVD format to the library, which they will manage either on-site or rent out, however they see fit. So obviously that comes with membership, and there's no expense associated with that.
That's great.
And we'll be working on other initiatives.
Great.
So thank you for recommending that.
Tom, just so you know, we had a meeting here in Town Hall. I think it's Ken Scheinbaum is his name, the library head from the county, about 2 years ago. And there may be some notes upstairs about that. But he talked about once we expand it, they will come with amenities to fill it up, books and stuff.
And one of the things we talked about at our department head meeting also was a more uniform set of monthly reports regarding particular areas of performance in various departments, and she volunteered to participate in that as well.
Right.
In terms of membership and circulation, items critical to their functioning. And the last thing, Mayor, is Councilman Malave announced at our last meeting that the Recreation Department was holding a workshop that would involve the residents of Freewood Acres to focus on the park that's being developed, Freewood Acres Park. And that date was May 22nd in the evening. The location wasn't determined yet. It's going to be at the library. Here we were trying to do it at the school, but it wasn't available. Lando Pines School, excuse me.
The firehouse wasn't
Correct.
open to.
Right. So it'll be here at the library, and I'm looking forward to that. And that's it for my report.
Okay, Mr. Chinesky, thank you. Mr. Gannon, do you have any of the reports here?
No, sir.
Okay. Mr. Walsh, we'll start with you tonight. What's up, sir?
Friday, they had Appreciation Day for all the volunteers over at the Senior Center. About 130 to 150 people there. It was a wonderful, wonderful day. The mayor was there for a little while. He got away from a busy day through personal difficulties and came. It was very nice to see all the people that volunteer to try to help our seniors in this community. It's such a well-run program, and it just brought joy to be around them, smiling and laughing. I got pictures taken with a bunch of lovely ladies, had dances with a couple, stayed there for about 3-4 hours, and it was just a wonderful day. I think Carol Zor and her whole staff over there are doing a tremendous job in helping to do things with our seniors in this community where they're in need. I did want to ask some questions if possible, and I also wanted to talk about the Alliance Optimist Golf Outing, which benefits the Howell Youth Alliance Group, is May 15th over at Eagle Oaks Country Club for anybody that's interested. It's usually a well-attended function, and it all comes back into our community. So I want to let everybody know there was still openings there, and that's May 15th. I was out on the southern part of town the other day, and I noticed they were doing lines on a couple of the roads. Mr. Nunziata, are these, I was looking at the list of roads that we'll be redoing, the 15 of them. Some of the roads we were painting, might they be on the list of what we're redoing?
No, normally the line striping is just the latex, the double solid lines that seem to wear. The roads that we are going to pave, if in fact they have been striped, part of the contract would be to restripe them. But normally I tell Public Works not to include those roads because they are on our list.
At no additional cost, they'd restripe them? It just...
Well, it's always an additional cost, but it's about 3 cents a foot, 3 to 4 cents a foot.
It just struck me, and I wanted to understand the whole system. The roads we're going to be redoing 2 months from now are being painted now. I wonder maybe if we can get all on the same page with that so that we're not wasting time, taxpayer money, to redo the painting on roads that are going to be repaved in 2 months. So, I don't know. Where I come from, I think I would call that a waste.
Bill, did you say that they weren't the same roads?
I-
Or you need to verify that?
Right. When I have a list of roads that are to be paved in the overlay program, I normally do not include them, or I notify Public Works that when they do their line striping contract, to not put them in there. I cannot confirm if they have or have not at this point.
Okay, I saw them doing some of the roads, I believe, that were on the list. You gave us a list of 15 roads that were going to be done this summer, I believe.
Yeah, a lot of those were portions of those roads, too.
That's why I wanted to ask.
Yeah,
I'll
good
give you a
question.
definitive answer before the next meeting.
Thank you very much, Bill. And one more thing I wanted to comment on. Russ Boland from the Planning Board gave us some suggested amendments about clustering to our ordinances back on April 4th. And I wanted to know if, Tom, you had a chance to research them and come up with any suggestions about that?
That it was referred to the planner who was working with the Master Plan Review Committee. I'm not sure if it was discussed yet.
If I may reply on that, it was forwarded to the planner whose recommendation was as we begin to develop the ordinances that will go hand in hand with the zone changes, that would be the time to incorporate many of his recommendations. And it was his position that we adopt many of them. He had answers to some where we were already doing some of that. That's already in our current
Okay.
ordinances, but he's in receipt of them. And perhaps, if you may, Mr. Janicki, if you could just maybe a quick follow-up to Councilman Walsh's point and make certain that Chuck is, in fact, working on those as an element to the draft ordinances, please.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
All right, Mrs. Showmaker, any comments?
I'm going to make it real quick. I
Okay.
just have one thing I want to follow up with. I know that we had turned over our ordinance for adult entertainment establishments to Chuck Newcomb. I want to know where we are from the financial aspect in respect to the gentleman that we paid, that was working on it prior to Mr. Newcomb. Yeah, we had a contract with somebody else that worked on it for years and years. What's the story with that? Did I miss it?
I think, if you may recall, I made a very strong recommendation some time ago. And I don't know what progress has been made in that regard. I think we discussed it since then in the back room with Mr. Gannon. I don't remember if
Probably
Mr.
an issue for
Chernetsky
Tom.
was
He
here
was
yet
gonna-
or not, quite frankly.
I think it's an issue for Mr. Gannon. Are you at liberty to respond publicly, Mr. Gannon, or is this a...
Essentially, it's a question of economics.
What's the question? And what are the economics?
How much you want to pay me to sue him?
Have we, I think, my recollection is we got a limited work product, which any one of us could have done, and none of us are planners. We were dissatisfied with the work product. We received whatever the materials were. We paid a portion of the bill, and I think we directed you not to pay any other portion of the bill.
That's correct.
And the question was, we were so dissatisfied with the work product, we wanted our money back. So the question was, from an economics perspective, what was the ROI to sue to get back some amount of money, and might we wind up paying an attorney the same or more to get our money back?
That's it in a nutshell, Mayor.
So we should cut our losses and move on.
Well, I don't want to predispose what the answer is,
I
but
think the outstanding amount was $6,000.
he wants an additional $6,000.
He doesn't want anything. If we want what we paid, it was $6,000.
We paid $6,000.
We paid $6,000 and we got nothing.
Well, I think the work product we got back was turned over to Mr. Newcomb.
He did do a draft ordinance, but it wasn't specifically what we wanted.
For $6,000 was half the payment for a draft ordinance?
There was also a report done and, other, quote, legwork done with regard to Howell Township and the geographic area.
And part of my frustration was he was hired before I was elected.
Still
So I was never involved in
No.
selecting this person, recruiting this person, and we're at somewhat of a disadvantage because this continues to linger on.
Well, I'll go back to your original offer, Mr. Gannon. I'd like you to sue him for the $6,000 for nothing. You asked.
I think I said 1/3 of any recovery, Mr. Walsh.
Do we really need his work at this point?
Mayor, I guess there's two items. There's the issue of the ordinance itself, which Chuck is
That's-
working on, and then there's the legal issue, which I think would be more appropriately discussed. If we were going to lay out a legal strategy, we might do it.
Okay,
where
we'll
we're
do it
all
in
to.
closed
Right.
session. Okay. Anything else, Mrs. Showmaker? Mr. Malave, you're up, sir.
Just really brief, Mayor. Just as a reminder that our nights at the Blue Cross is May 18th. And, okay, Pete.
Joe just crossed that off his list.
Oh, did he? All right. Well, basically, the national anthem actually is going to be performed by a very talented young group of young ladies from Howell High School, the Rebelettes. So that by itself, it's worth the admission coverage. I believe that you can obtain tickets through the Recreation Department here. I was incorrectly, I believe I said last week it was $9. They are indeed $10. However, you do receive the a hat, a Blue Cross hat, official hat, and also a voucher for food. And I do believe that there are some free tickets available to some kids, so you may want to check with the rec department for more information about that. Also, Mr. Mayor and rest of the council and basically the Howard Township community at large, I was reading the Tri-Town news last week, and I was over the weekend, and I found an interesting article that I'm going to embarrass Mayor DeBella, but it appears that Kimball Medical Center is honoring and recognizing our mayor, which is basically going to be the H. George Buckworth Humanitarian Award. It's given to 3 individuals throughout the community, and for his efforts, I'm proud that our mayor and my friend, Mayor DeBella, it's been recognized for his efforts. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor, for right now.
Thank you, Mr. Malave. I appreciate that. Deputy Mayor.
I'm going to pass.
All right, I just have a couple of quick things. I'd like to take this opportunity to both acknowledge and recognize people in the community that have done real neat, special things. Had the pleasure of going to the Ramtown Fire Company's annual pancake breakfast on Sunday morning. My family and Mr. Malave was there as well. The Ramtown firemen continue to be a wonderful group, as are all of the firemen in our community. We are so blessed with the different fire services that we have, and Ramtown did a wonderful job. I received a letter from Commander Ben Novick of our local Veterans of Foreign War affiliate. Memorial Day, obviously, I believe is the 29th, and the traditional events will take place on that day, 10 o'clock here at our monuments, and 11 o'clock at the park in Farmingdale, and encourage everyone to please take a moment to reflect in honor of those veterans who gave their lives for our country, many of whom hail from Howell Township. This Sunday at the Elks Lodge in the Ramtown section, there's another pancake breakfast. This time is a fundraiser for the Boy Scouts that are affiliated with that Elks Lodge in Ramtown. We received correspondence from Cablevision. There are some lineup changes being made to the local service that affects Howell Township. The channels are now apparently, or some of these channels are now being launched on a digital broadcasting basis. Channel 7 will now be digitally available on 108, NBC Weather Plus on 109, and WNBC affiliate number 4 will be on channel 110. So I'd like to ask Mr. Janeski if we could please maybe have some notice posted on our website so that residents could find that under general news and events. As Councilman Walsh mentioned, the senior event Friday at our senior center was a wonderful event, and Mrs. Zur and her entire staff are to be commended for the job that they do. It's a most professionally run operation. Last Thursday evening, the master plan was approved by the Howell Township Planning Board, which is a rather significant and monumentous act. It was the culmination of what seemed as if it was about 10 years worth of work, but it was probably at least 18 months worth of work, and I believe that the ordinances are being prepared so that they can be forwarded to the council for deliberation. I'm going to ask that Mr. Chernetsky and Mr. Davis work with the planning office to attempt to have those ordinances prepared for our consideration as soon as reasonably possible so that we can act as quickly as possible on implementing these changes. Last Saturday morning, there was the opening day at the North Howell Little League, and Mrs. Schlegel, our recreation director, was kind enough to be there. As Councilman Walsh could attest, in addition to myself, she threw out an honorary first pitch, and she has a fastball that rivals Randy Johnson, and it was no fun having to follow her after she nailed a strike across home plate. So wherever Mrs. Schlegel is, I would just ask that the next time we do that together, I get to go first.
The mayor can pitch arc ball.
That's it. I also have a statement that I would like to read regarding some land preservation issues, and I'll make a copy of this available to the community later in the evening. And I'll attempt to read it as quickly as possible, being conscious of the time, and I left my glasses home, so please bear with me.
You want me to read it?
I'll effort through it. Recently, there has been much discussion regarding the acquisition of open space in Howell. A centerpiece of our administration has been the preservation of open space and farmlands. Land preservation has a demonstrated value proposition for the people of Howell. Land preserved is land that cannot be residentially developed. Preserved land helps the township maintain its rural and green character. It also promotes the continuity of farming, which is an important aspect of our local economy and the history of Howell. The preservation of land also helps to lessen the strain on our infrastructure. It slows the rate of congestion and helps offset the impact that growth has on the environment and our precious natural resources, like our water supply. Perhaps just as important is that absent more single-family residential growth, we can slow the rate of educational costs that consume about 75% of the local tax dollar. We made preserving and acquiring the Harms and Pinnacle properties a main priority nearly 3 years ago. It was a bipartisan decision. My predecessor, Tim Konopka, was also in favor of this acquisition. This property is the last parcel of land of this size, perhaps anywhere in the county. In total, the two pieces consume approximately 300 acres of flat, dry land in the central part of the community. The land is also adjacent to the Manasquan River, which is an important water supply that must be protected. At today's zoning, if left for residential development, the community could be faced with close to 300 more single-family units. Left to be residentially developed, the township would suffer major setbacks, not to mention the possibility of having to educate up to 500 more school children every year. If completely developed, this could create a tax burden of nearly $5 million in new school expenses every year at today's rate. In 10 years, it's safe to assume that this $5 million would be significantly greater. For all of the right reasons, chief among them local residents' support of land preservation, we passed not one but two open space taxes, we proceeded in acquiring both properties. The process has been tedious, it's been complex, and it's been challenging. Such is the case any time there is an historic initiative underway, and clearly the preservation of 300 acres is historic. As of this date, the township now owns half of this land. The final purchase price at today's market of the Harms property was $12,350,000. This is roughly $82,000 per acre. We are also close to acquiring the remaining piece of the land, the Pinnacle property, and are in final negotiations for a sale price now. At issue is whether or not the township has pursued alternate means of funding to acquire the land. Unfortunately, like many things in our community, the issue has become slightly politicized, and the facts have been shoved aside for the sake of personal agendas. There's a time and a place for politics. However, on open space, it's not the time, nor is it the place. I'm pleased to report that as a part of our overall tactical plan for the acquisition of these 300 acres, we spent considerable time working on alternate funding sources like grants and outside aid. However, like all complex issues, there is a certain methodical process that must be followed using a certain timeline. Since the land is being acquired via condemnation, we must, by law, have immediate access to the funds to acquire the property. The township could not, for example, on a promissory of a grant application, buy the land. This is a serious process. It needs serious tactical and strategic planning. That is what has taken place. Concurrent to the land acquisition, we've explored and readied the township for the application of alternate funds to supplement what the local taxpayers will absorb. The use of certain traditional green acres funding would have created some limitations for the township. For example, we would have been limited to some degree regarding what we could use the land for in 5, 20, or 25 years from now. In addition, contrary to what has been said, we already have applied for Green Acres funds for the township on an at-large basis. Howell, in fact, is one of about 200 towns that is a part of the state's Planning Incentive Grant. The acronym is known as PIG. This is actually an umbrella program under Green Acres. Along with these other towns, Howell Township has access to $90 million in state aid to help pay for and acquire land. In fact, in the last 3 years alone, the township has received commitments for more than $2.8 million in PIG funding for open space acquisition. These amounts have been verified by the Chief Financial Officer's office. This nearly $3 million, for example, has been used to acquire 270 acres of land in Howell. This includes the Bottom Track, Lake Louise, and the Price property. In fact, through this Green Acres PIG program, we've acquired these precious properties on a 50-50 grant matching basis. That is, the PIG paid half, and Howell Township funded the other half. With respect to Harms and Pinnacle, it has been, and it remains our intent, to use the PIG Green Acres funds to pay for up to 50% of these land costs. For Harms alone, this would amount to a commitment of nearly $6 million, which is a historic amount. Contrary to what has been reported by some, we have already applied for grant money for Harms and Pinnacle. By virtue of our PIG status, we have a standing grant application already on file with Green Acres for funding, much like we used to acquire Bonham, for example. To apply for the funds, we first need to settle on various subdivisions of the land. We also need to have a strategic discussion about the possible placement of perhaps another high school on that land and other long-range uses. To submit for the PIG funds, we must first decide what we may want to do with the land, which requires very serious and in-depth planning. This is because if the land is not subdivided for, again, open space purposes, we will limit what we can do with the land if we apply for the PIG money based on all 300 acres being used in one large lot size. We also cannot finalize future plans and any land divisions without knowing if we're also going to secure the Pinnacle property. We need to know what our future is on both before we can do anything on either one of them. This is why we have not already applied to get our 50% share from the PIG fund, of which we have an open standing application. For some unfortunate reason, some have muddled these critical details and these facts. Let me also point out that the township has been in serious discussions with the New Jersey Water Supply Authority about their acquiring the 100-foot buffer along the entire parcel that borders the water supply. The revenues generated from such a sale would be used to directly offset our acquisition expenses. We will continue these discussions with the New Jersey Water Supply Authority that began some 2 years ago. In addition, we've had discussions with the County of Monmouth regarding their participation in acquiring portions of the land back from us for the county's use, and/or in helping to absorb expenses related to some future amenity that may be planned for the site. We expect closure on the Pinnacle matter one way or the other within the next few weeks. Once that matter is resolved, we must then determine how to parcel out the property so we may simply issue our request for our PIG monies, of which we already have an open application. Absent these final matters being resolved, it would be premature to act. Moreover, contrary to statements made by some, we already have the alternate funding available. Preserving open space is paramount to the future of Howell. Before the public is misled, individuals should first get the facts. They should be more adequately informed on the issues rather than making statements that may mislead some. We will preserve this land. We will preserve other parcels of land in Howell Township because it is the right thing to do for Howell. And doing what is right always wins against political gamesmanship. Be happy to make a copy of this available to anyone who's interested in seeing it. That's all I had on the
comment,
reports.
please?
Sure.
Well, I know that was directed to me, and I don't appreciate it, but that I'm being lied to by the professionals in this township. I have documents in front of me right here from attorneys saying there are only 98 building lots on the Horn Pinnacle track, not 300. So the information being given to me by either that letter or the professionals in this township are erroneous. Now, I don't know who's telling me the truth. I'm told to rely on the professionals that are hired for this township. And I asked numerous times if we had applied for those grants in other counties and state money. And I was told, no, that there were talks, but no, we did not apply because it would limit what could be built. I am all for preserving open space. All for it. But I am all for trying to use state and county money to help subsidize and take some of the pain from the taxpayers in Howell Township. Owning a mortgage company, I know what's going on with people in this township. I get calls every single day of people not being able to make it, whose taxes have doubled, not just under this administration, in the last 6, 7 years. Their taxes have doubled. And the people are having a hard time putting food on the table, clothes on their backs, and shelter over their children's heads. So I am very concerned. And personally, if I was to spend this amount of money, I would have asked the people of the township, do you want me to spend the money on this? I would have asked for their permission. And I wonder what is the true statement, 98 homes or over 300? Because if it's not 98, and what the mayor just said is correct, then I damn well want to know whether professionals in Howell Township are lying to me. Because this is in black and white that I will make at your disposal at the end of the night. And you tell me if it says over 300. I may not be getting the truth, folks. Some of my decisions may be coming from erroneous facts being said to me by professionals. But what else do I have to form my decisions on? But what I'm being told by professionals. I wish I knew everything that was being told to me by them was true. But something that was just said here was not true. 300 to 98? Which one is true? Both I'm being told by professionals in this township. The numbers are too far apart. And I am all for preserving open space. I am all for going for county and state money to help us preserve that open space. I was born in the country. I like the country. God bless you all.
The only comments that we'll make is that using the math from last week, 150 acres, 2 units to the acre, it was you, Councilman Walsh, that observed the number of units that could go there.
The maximum units, Mayor, not having to do with wetlands, not having to do with roads, not having to do with buffers. The maximum that could have been built on 300 acres and 2-acre zoning was 150. That wasn't the number. I went back and researched all the paperwork given to us by the professionals that were hired by you and this council, by all of us. And this is the number that came from professionals that we hired. The maximum homes that could have been built, building lots, was 98.
Well, when you're done, I don't want to interrupt you. I let you go before.
I'm sorry, Mayor.
That's okay. I understand.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. So clearly, I don't know what document that you are referring to, and we'll all take a look at it. If it's 100 homes, if it's 200 homes, if it's 300 homes, it's too many homes. If 98 was the right number, it's 98 more houses that don't need to be on the Harms and the Pinnacle property. And quite frankly, the conversation was around, did we apply for Green Acres monies? Having looked into Green Acres, there are at least 3 different options for Green Acres fundings. There are the conventional options for Green Acres fundings for towns that don't have PIG approval, whereby you would have to apply and potentially have access to getting grant approval. This municipality is in a different position because we have the preferred PIG approvals with respect to Green Acres acquisition funds. So when the question was, have we applied for Green Acres monies? The answer is no, we don't have to apply for a conventional Green Acres amount of money because we are a PIG community which affords us a privilege available to only 200 other municipalities. And by virtue of using the PIG funds, we have to have the lots subdivided in a way so that we can ensure we have better access to use those properties. So the questions were asked, and they've been answered. In terms of which professionals may or may not have lied, I certainly don't think that any township professional has intentionally lied or has misled anyone. There's oftentimes that people ask questions that I'm not even privy to the things that they ask. But clearly, I wouldn't think that any township professional specifically lied. or there are erroneous facts. The simple math was 150 acres, 300 acres in total, of which it's 2 units to the acre. If it's 250, it's zoned ARE2 at the current time. So the fact of the matter is that there were many, many statements made about we didn't apply for green acres. Why didn't we apply for green acres? We should have applied for state monies. Well, the simple fact of the matter is that we already have, that we expect to get half of the funds back that we will have paid to acquire these properties by virtue that we're a PIG community. So we're in a preferred position already. So it was important that these comments be clarified so people were not misled about whether or not we explored all venues to help remedy the issue for the taxpayers. And we expect to get $6 million of the $12 million back on the Harms acquisition because we are a preferred PIG community. Tell you what, that's pretty good money as far as I'm concerned to be able to preserve, in that case, about 150 acres of property. So,
I'll,
you would like to speak, Mr. Basco?
yeah, just for a moment. This particular spot, and we talked about this a lot last meeting, and actually it wasn't a topic for tonight, but since we got into it,
I didn't even see
this council knew about 3 years ago that an application had actually been talked about for just the one piece. I think it was the Harms piece, but I could be wrong. But one of the two pieces had an application for a 164-unit complex. However, this discussion actually doesn't only go back 3 years. It goes back maybe 8 or 9 years when we first started talking to the owner of Pinnacle, Mr. Herbert, who was now passed on. But over the years, we kept asking, whenever you stop mining, let us know, because separate from not wanting to have houses go there, that was going to be an ideal spot for, again, an identity-created township amenities place, whether it was going to be for, like some of the kids talked about today, a teen center, or for a performing arts center, or for another high school for the regional, which was talked about over the last 7 or 8 years. So it's not just a straight dollars and cents argument, and the discussion actually has gone back well beyond the 3 years that have been alluded to. And although the numbers do divide to 150, an applicant can put in whatever they want and then go for variances and waivers. And there was, in fact, an application for 150-plus home I think it was 164 to be exact, and Pauline may know better than me, but that was 3 years ago, and that's when we really got serious about it, because Mr. Herbert was ready to stop mining then and go to a home developer. So that's how we got into this as serious as we did at that point in time.
All right, 8A1, procedure for first aid.
I'd like to ask the professionals, though. I asked this question, do we apply for all available monies for this track? And I was told that no, it was a poly decision not to, and that it would limit what we could put on the property. Did we apply for any available monies that could have been used for this Harms Pinnacle purchase?
Let me just have to break it down into two areas. The question with respect to Green Acres, there's really two large banks of funds out there. There's the State Green Acres program, and there's the County Open Space program.
Okay.
Let me take the first one. Because the municipality has an open space tax, and because it has an open space element in its master plan, it qualified to apply for a particular program called Planning Incentive Grant. This way, you're spared the agony of applying for each piece of property you want to preserve, because you are implementing your plan. If in this case, Harms Pinnacle wasn't included as a project we want, what we would need to do is fill out a form at the state informing them that we want to add this property under our Planning Incentive Grant program. You asked the question if we had submitted to Green Acres for that property, and my answer is no.
No, we have not submitted to the state
For this property.
For this property, we have not submitted the forms, so we did not apply for monies for this property.
It's an incomplete, inaccurate statement, because we could not have done that, because the property, I am going to answer, Mrs. Weitengruber, and I'm going to ask you to please refrain. He did ask the manager, but I'm going to answer another piece of it. It's not fair to ask him the question, because he wasn't here to know whether or not we directed the management to do it.
Well,
Go ahead, Mr.
the
Zernecki.
bottom
Obviously,
line-
Mrs. Weingruber wants to run the
The
meeting.
bottom line is, at some point, if council is inclined to ask the state to fund all or a portion of that land, we would need to notify them that we are now including this property.
That's correct.
And we have not yet done that.
Okay.
And the other question you asked me was about the county open space program. We did not apply to the county open space program to help us acquire this land. Maximum that the county pays out is $250,000 for any project. We can apply in the coming round in November for park development funds.
Well, all of that brings on some risks, though, of loss of control, which is another reason why we didn't necessarily go for green acres in that spot, because this is a jewel for Howell Township. We don't want to have the rest of the state.
Very true, that's why we didn't pursue it.
And
We
it's
don't want the
policy
rest of the
strictly-
state having open access to a park when we already have Oakland Park as a state park.
It's strictly a policy issue.
I-
Right.
Council wants to
I
do that.
think there are two important things to point out. From a PIG perspective, we first must subdivide the property. We could not have filed the paperwork, which is a formality to get our 50%, until the property has been subdivided.
And how do we do that without
No,
knowing what to
let's
subdivide it
finish.
for?
That's
yet?
correct. And the answer is, we haven't even acquired the Pinnacle property. We don't know if we're going to get it. So we are unable at this point to submit the application because you can't subdivide when you don't know what you don't have. So as I mentioned in my statement, there are certain tactical things that need to be done, that are responsible things to be done. Until we know how the property is subdivided, we cannot apply for the PIG monies. Because if we applied on the basis of a total of 150 acres, or if we applied on the basis of 300 acres, we would be limited in terms of the kind of amenities we could somewhere down the road put on the property.
Exactly right.
By subdividing it, for example, we could parcel out the 100-foot waterway that we may, for example, sell to the Watershed Authority.
Right,
We may subdivide out the
80
properties
acres.
that we need to build a high school.
about 80 acres.
So the fact of the matter is that if, had we applied for the PIG money sooner than we were ready, we would have done so at great peril to the future of this municipality. So everything has a process. Once we know whether we're going to have the Pinnacle process or the Pinnacle land, then it can be subdivided, then we can look at the plan, then we can file for monies that we have already filed for in aggregate and get half of the money back that we have outlaid. If we were to do so sooner, we would lose control of the property, we'd lose control of what we could able to put there, and we would do so in an irresponsible way for the township. The second piece, with respect to the farmland issue, monies that are available from the county, there's only $250,000 available to the municipality. We still have a vibrant $250,000 per round available to each municipality. If we were to use the $250,000, is that right, Mr. Zernecki, the $250,000?
That was the extent of any previous grants.
So that was what, last year's money from the county?
Correct.
So if we were to use that as an estimate, the $250,000, that would get us nowhere in terms of the overall acquisition cost, and we would tie up all $250,000 on Harm's Pinnacle and not leave anything behind to preserve farms, of which we have close to 1,000 acres under contract agreement right now that Mr. Costigan is working on trying to preserve. If we were to use all $250,000 on Harm's Pinnacle, then we wouldn't have any money to preserve any farms this year. Not to mention, that is an application for which there is no guaranteed approval. Whereas under the PIG program, we are already an approved town where they will match 50% of the funds. So that is the background, and in fairness to Mr. Zernecki, he wasn't here, the rationale behind why we did what we did with the PIG money, which we are still eligible to get and we will receive, and why we could not take the money from the county, because then we would not have been able to preserve any farms in those particular years.
Taking money from the county also goes back to the control question. For that little 250, you may lose a lot of control of the park, too, again. So
We actually,
there's a lot of...
I respect all your reasons, okay? I really do. I respect your reasons, but your reasons don't come back to me as over 300 homes, 1,000 kids that you stated last week, Mayor. Your reasons don't come back to we applied for all monies available. We didn't apply for nothing.
That's an inaccurate
Well,
statement, Mr. Walsh.
The managers, all the professionals are saying, we didn't apply for nothing. Our law firm stating there's 98 buildable lots. I mean,
Let me rephrase the question. Bobby, straight out.
I'm
Do
gonna
you
take
want,
a
do you
break.
want Howell Township to have these
Take a
300
break.
acres or not?
The answer is not to take a break.
Let
So-
him answer the question. There's
I
300 acres.
strongly am all for preserving any open space possible.
So
and
why
using
you
any
ma-
monies from the state and county at any time to help subsidize the expense that will cost the taxpayers of Howell. I am not for spending millions upon millions of dollars of the taxpayers of Howell money without asking them. I think they have the right to be asked.
Now we're ready to do it.
I think he said yes.
I don't know, but I think the answer we've got is we have applied for the monies. To file the petition now would have been a tactical mistake. So you can't file until you subdivide. So I'm not going to allow the facts to be misled.
Maybe just a quick statement. Mr. Walsh is walking out of the room, but I'm sure he'll hear me. Mr. Walsh, the residents of Howell Township, in my opinion, to me, they have answered that question is yes. They want open space protected. When I ran for office, I was running for office campaigning. The most important issue that came up door after door after door after door is open space protection. And so as far as I'm concerned, in my judgment, they have answered the question. So when you said to ask the residents whether or not to spend the money to protect open space,
Say it.
in my view, they have already. Now, things change from year to year, and I understand that everything has I'm sorry, I was really interrupted by Mr. Libero again. I understand that about the monies being spent and the taxpayers, the monies and everything like that. Believe me, I'm a taxpayer myself, and I'm probably one of those who have told you, geez, I'm here until I can afford to be here. And it's getting out of hand. I realize that. It's like this in every township, however. It's like this throughout the state of New Jersey. It's a statewide crisis that we have, not just a Howard Township crisis. We are protecting open space. I know you're in favor of protecting open space. You have said so yourself. Unfortunately, protecting open space costs money. And, that's a price we all have to pay to protect some open space. So.
One quick comment, Mayor.
Go ahead, Mr.
I just
Maker.
think in the respect, what the people are looking for is let's not forget that we did put the referendum on for the 1 cent increase for land preservation, and it passed.
We already had one.
And we're going to do it again,
Yeah,
probably?
and we're
this
going to
year?
do it again. So, I mean, the people are speaking to us.
Okay, let's move on. The purpose of the debate isn't to walk away from it. 8A1, procedure for the first aid. Fire department's holding a coin toss. Mr. Chinesky, can you elaborate on the back office work you've done with these volunteer groups, please? We-
This is the coin toss thing?
Yeah.
That was,
No. Macy's.
This is
Yeah,
for the-
we've already had the introduction on the 25th, just for anyone's benefit. Maybe you could just elaborate.
Sure.
And we have a hearing on the 16th.
Sure. A number of our volunteer emergency services groups utilize coin tosses for fundraising purposes. We were advised by the state police that there are procedures for doing this, particularly on state highways and also on county highways, and they recommended an ordinance. We met with, we had previously were about to introduce the ordinance, and one of the groups had raised some various legitimate concerns about how this might impact their ability to raise funds. And we had some meetings with the appropriate police staff, and we answered their questions, and I believe we're now ready to move forward.
All right, anyone have any questions in anticipation of the hearing on the 16th?
no, that's pretty detailed.
All right, there are no introductions for the 16th, so we have nothing under 9A. Under 9B, we have a series of resolutions, and we also have,
Motion.
under 9C1, accepting the resignation of a advisory committee member, Mr. Fabrice, who I understand is no longer able to attend the meetings. Any comments on any of the 9Bs or C?
Mr. Mayor, there is add-ons. There's an
Sorry.
add-on list in front of you.
Yes, there is. For the benefit of the public, 9B8, accepting or authorizing acceptance of performance guarantees, Matthew Hughes of Hollywood Avenue, site improvements. 9B9, authorizing an amendment to the ABC liquor license and expansion of the premises of the Chapter House, authorizing the waiver of connection fees for those properties, services under the recently installed Route 9 South Sanitary Sewer Collection System, authorizing execution of land use developers agreement and maintenance escrow agreements for certain stormwater management facilities in Pine Hill Number 3, and under motions 9C2, the addition of a raffle license for a ticket raffle for St. Catherine's Church.
I would just ask that you add these to the agenda. No actions required this evening on these.
Okay. I'd like a motion to please add these to the agenda for our meeting on the 16th.
We're not in regular
Right.
session.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. We first need a motion to go into regular session, please.
So moved, Mayor.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments? Hearing none, roll call to go into regular, please.
Mr. Malave?
Yes.
Mrs. Showmaker?
Yes.
Mr. Tabasco?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
He's absent the chamber right now.
Mayor DeBella?
Yes. All right, can I have a motion, please, to add on the add-on resolutions in motion?
Mayor, motion to add on 9B8 through 9B11 and motion 9C2.
We have a motion, we need a second.
Second.
Are there any remarks? This
I
is just
actually
a-
have one on 9B9, which I believe is for the Chapter House, just out of curiosity. I know they expanded onto the deck when they made that indoors about 2 years ago. Does this have anything to do with the non-smoking thing now, where they're maybe adding a party area for the smokers outside? Anybody have any idea? It wasn't in the backup.
I don't believe he said it was for smoking.
Didn't say anything.
Didn't
Well,
say.
there's no vote tonight. Well, I guess we'll
Okay.
we'll talk to Corey
He
offline.
just filed his application for expansion in accordance with ABC rules and regs. And
right.
he did get his expansion, or the deck, 3 years ago, actually.
Three, yeah. So nobody has any real idea. Okay.
Are there any other comments to add these items onto the agenda? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Malave?
Yes.
Mrs. Showmaker?
Yes.
Mr. Tabasco?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
He's absent the chamber.
Chamber, yeah.
Mayor DeBella?
Yes. All right, we have discussion items. The first is 10-1. This is a continuing discussion around a proposal for a hotel ordinance. I think Mr. Newcomb is in the chambers. Mr. Newcomb, would you come on up to the front if you wouldn't mind, sir? Welcome.
Snuck right in.
I've been
Snuck right
panicking
in.
for like 10 minutes.
He's been here.
Sitting quietly.
Good evening, Mr. Newcomb.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Welcome.
All right, we'd like
Good
to review the latest recommendations your office has worked on relative to an at-large ordinance governing the use of hotels in the highway zone. If you would, you and Mr. Chernetsky both please walk us through this discussion. Mr. Chernetsky, would you like to start first, please?
Yeah, just, thank you, Mayor. While Chuck gets squared away. Last work session, we had this item on for discussion. Mr. Newcomb reviewed a great deal of public input, and we've now, council requested that we have a ordinance prepared, which was put in front of you, that we might be able to introduce if we get that, receive that direction for next week, or the next voting session. I would just say many of the items that were brought to our attention weren't necessarily zoning issues as much as they were site design and community design issues. This also relates to the next item on the discussion, by the way, is the maximum size of a warehouse at 125,000 square feet. The bottom line is, in terms of where I think we need to take Route 9, is we need to have a harmonious and uniform design standards for the highway. So a lot of, getting back to the hotel ordinance, many of the issues that were raised should be covered under a community design ordinance. Such an ordinance is proposed through the master plan process. And what I would like to do is, as Chuck goes through this ordinance that's proposed here, highlight some of the, through a PowerPoint presentation, some of the key aspects of a community design ordinance that we're working on that I think would address many of the other concerns that aren't specifically laid out in this hotel ordinance, which is strictly a zoning matter. use in bulk. There's other items that we'll show you, but I'll let Mr. Newcomb continue on with this conversation.
Go ahead, Mr. Newcomb, please.
Okay. The changes that we made, as we had discussed at the last work session, one of the changes was in the definition of the hotel itself. We made it a much broader definition, saying that it was a commercial establishment containing 60 rooms or more, individual sleeping rooms or suites, excluding accommodations for employees, each having a private bath attached thereto for the purposes of providing overnight lodging facilities to the general public for compensation with or without meals, and in which ingress and egress to and from all rooms may be made through an inside lobby, office, or lobby supervised by a person in charge at all hours. For the purpose of this chapter, overnight shall continuous occupancy of a room or suite by the same person or persons for a period not to exceed 14 days and greater than 24 hours. Permitted accessory uses would be then included within the hotel, would include but are not limited to restaurants, retail and personal services facilities, banquet facilities, health clubs, and customary laundry and dry cleaning services. This definition change, I think, addressed some of the issues in terms of length of stay and also that were raised by some members of the public, and also in terms of how the hotel unit would be basically ingress and egress would take place with it in terms of references to having a more of a class type facility versus something that's run of the mill, so to speak. And then again, the accessory uses, there was comments and concerns that the accessory uses would not be part of the hotel, and we tried to make it more explicit in terms of they actually being part of the hotel. The next items there are conference centers. The definitions really did not change there. Then we get into the conditions for the hotel. We increased the minimum lot area to 5 acres. Again, the minimum. I noted one mistake, and I probably conveyed this mistake to Mr. Gannon's office. Minimum lot width was a 250. Previously, Mr. Walsh had asked us to look at increasing that number. Our office did some further work in terms of researching some comparables in terms of other municipalities and actual proposals, hotel proposals that had basically been made to those communities. And my recommendation was to increase it to 500 feet versus the 250. And I noticed in the ordinance, I had, in terms of the paper backup material, I had given Mr. Wall or Mr. Gannon, it had 450. So I would ask that the council correct that and insert 500.
What about the next one where it says frontage? Is that to be 500 too then, not 250?
Frontage, lot frontage should in essence be this. No, lot frontage can be 250. But
so you can have a flag lot type thing.
Right, you could have a flag lot type thing, or a type of lot where, in essence, the entrance is 250. You come back, and it swings. Yeah, the flag lot would be a good way of elaborating on that, or that could be increased if you so desired. Minimum yards shall be the same as yard requirements established for the highway development zones. The other change that we made was we changed the maximum impervious improvement coverage was 75%. We reduced that down to what is presently the improvement coverage for the HD1 and HD2 zones, which is 70%. The next item is the height issue. And we basically are recommending 4 stories, but not more than 50 feet in height. Other conditions, again, conditions being, you know, a minimum of at least 60 units, you know, and
Mr. Newcomb, I have a
and
question.
floor area for each unit.
In our backup, there is on this height issue, there's a memo from the manager that says, in consideration of the height discussion concerning the hotel ordinance, it appears that there is no height limit under any current zoning in the highway commercial zones in Howell. And then you go on in an email to the manager that we all got a copy of. It says, I did a search in the township code for height, and in essence, there are no height restrictions right now. So somebody
Well-
could come in and build an 11-story building in the highway zone?
They would have to, one of the controlling factors, and we presently have, the planning board has an application, is the side yard requirements, because the side
Right.
yard requirements require you to have, becomes a minimum of whatever your height proposal is. So, for example, a proposal that we dealt with within the technical review committee today has a height of 52 feet, all right, or 50 feet. It's a Best Buy, and in essence, it requires then that the side yard be at least 50 feet. So in essence, you know, we have, that becomes somewhat of a controlling factor. And one of the issues that we're faced with, I think, in our highway development districts is that we have a lot of what I would call small lots that, you know, don't give you the advantage of basically having very big side yards. In the case of this Best Buy, for example, Best Buy is totally a redevelopment project. It's replacing the Frank's Nursery, so it'll be pretty much, you know, consuming that footprint within Frank's Nursery.
So that's going to be a 50-foot building, did I understand you correctly?
50 foot with the Best Buy has the little sign that sticks up in the air. It's a parapet, it isn't really a floor or anything like that. But it will be, you know, in other words, it required it to then have a side yard of a similar amount.
Is that application already in?
That application's before the planning board
It's
right
before
now,
the planning board, and we have no height ordinance at all in place,
except for the side yard requirements.
except for the side yard requirement.
Right, which then, in other words, if they didn't have that amount, all right, in the side yard, they would not be able to.
Well, they'd have to
you
go
know,
for.
It would have to be a bulk variance.
So if somebody did have the side yard, though, they can go up 10 stories right now, and we couldn't stop them. Is that a correct answer?
That's a correct answer.
Which is unbelievable. This township has never had that kind of protection.
What can we do about that now?
Well, that's the next
That's-
discussion. That's the
But I mean, okay,
Okay.
I would like to, are we going to discuss that tonight?
it's the next one.
It's the next item.
Okay,
It's the
thank
next
you
i- it's the
very
next
much.
item.
Okay.
I'll wait
That's
for
what
that.
it's on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Parking was one of, we pretty much made some modifications there. We had reduced the parking spaces we had talked about in terms of the restaurant for every 4 seats. This has been changed now to every 3 seats. There also is a provision within it in terms of having, giving 1 parking space per employee, again, which was another recommendation. And that is, I believe, is it. So there's all those changes that I have noted that we, in fact, many of them we talked about at the last work session in April, you know, have been incorporated within this draft.
All right, questions for Mr. Newcomb? Why don't we start, Mr. Walsh, we'll start with you, and then we'll go right down the line and pose any questions, please, to Mr. Newcomb.
You'd like to start with me tonight, huh, Mayor?
You know, last
God bless you.
That's
week
right.
we started with Mr. Malavi all the time, so
Did you?
we'll start with you.
Well, I feel privileged tonight,
I'm
Mayor.
delighted.
I'd like to, why nothing about requirements for the DOT or the DEP and other approvals prior to an application being deemed complete? What happens if we approve
Well,
this?
we do that.
So
What?
That is part of our checklist for any
That's
project.
part of our checklist.
Automatic for any project that comes in within that district.
Okay, so we don't have to have it in the ordinance, it's automatic.
Right. It's an automatic. It's an
Okay.
automatic for anything that fronts on a state highway. As part of our checklist, there is outside agency requirements, and DOT is one of them.
I spoke to some different municipalities, and it seemed like in their ordinances, it was more like a 50 to 60% total impervious coverage. We're only lowering it to 70. Why not lower it even more than that?
Well, I think in fairness, because of the districts right now allow for, the HD1 and HD2 district allow for a 70% impervious coverage. Now, it could be lowered, but I think it would need to be lowered in a more of a comprehensive sense in terms of the bulk requirements for the zone versus a specific use.
I'm not a very intelligent person.
Okay?
How can you explain it to me in English so that I can understand, please?
Okay, the zone itself, the whole area, the designated area of Highway Development 1 and Highway Development 2, all right, the impervious coverage for whether it's, Frank's Nursery, for, Lowe's, for any development within that zone is 70%, all right? I would recommend that we would change the impervious surface or the coverage for the whole zone, all right, versus an individual use within that zone. I guess is my point.
Mr. Walsh, if I can just add,
Sure, you may.
the fact that we're dealing with a big box retail store coming in that essentially is going to have the footprint of the type of conditional hotel that would be allowed here, I think speaks to Mr. Newcomb's point that we need to have a cohesive vision for that highway corridor and not deal with issues on a piecemeal basis.
I'm just asking so I can be clear. I don't.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just
yeah,
making.
we've had some. Yeah, I'm trying to understand it so that when people ask me, I can answer them in an intelligent
Right.
fashion. Some of the words he used, I can't even spell. Okay, so.
Well, I think in essence we want to treat everybody the same within the zoning district.
I
That's in
understand.
essence.
I don't believe there's any language in here to protect the residents' streets with something coming out onto the streets where residents already live. Should there be language in there to protect residential streets? I mean,
Absolutely.
I don't believe there's anything in here from mine and some other people's research to protect them.
Well, I think we have things within the land development ordinance, all right, that in essence a project would have to meet. For example, there are buffer requirements for all projects within, any project within our ordinance right now, all right, there is a perimeter buffer requirement between any non-residential activity, all right, a hotel, a big box, whatever, and a residential area. Now, it's 50 feet, all right, that buffer, and that's a restricted area where no development can take place in that area. But, again, that is, one of the requirements that any development, in essence, would have to meet.
It's still, I don't think you answered what I asked, or you didn't answer it to what I would like to see put in the ordinance. There's nothing to protect residential streets right now where they could build these big box buildings and come right onto, or these hotel conference centers, and come right onto residential streets.
Or you mean the access onto residential
Yes.
streets?
That's exactly what I meant.
Okay, then you could make a condition that it basically has to act, that it has to front on a state highway.
Absolutely.
I mean, only.
And wasn't that the intent with and this was prior to most of our time up here, maybe Mr. Davis could answer, the Lanes Mill Shopping Center fronts on Route 9.
Yes.
And that's done for a reason. We need to have protections so that any retail complex like that has to have access from the highway.
But again, to go to Tom's point, Manager Tom, not Tom the attorney, that goes under an umbrella type zoning ordinance, not necessarily specific to this hotel.
Well, you could,
So
we could make it a condition.
Yes, we
Right.
could. Thank you, Chuck.
I'd prefer to do the planning that Tom's talking about,
Okay.
rather again, and
Well-
take piecemeal shots at, okay, a hotel has this buffer, a fire station has this. Let's make a uniform picture, and you're very good at doing it, so you take the lead and do it.
So in terms, yeah, so what we'd want to do is like any sort of use that exceeds a certain square footage. I think it makes sense to say you need to have direct access onto a highway.
Absolutely. Protect our residents. I would like to see that in our ordinance here. I would like to read one other thing into,
Before we go off that point, I agree, and that's why we asked Mr. Janetsky to look at sort of a vision for the highway
Right.
from a big picture perspective, which needs to include access from a major highway. But I think if we're going to act on this hotel ordinance anytime reasonably soon for the protection of the municipality, we need that provision in there now, because it may take us a little bit of time before we finalize this big picture discussion that could be many, many months from now. So, I mean, do you see any objectionable reason why to put that provision in this right now?
I don't see any problem in terms of doing that.
All right, so I think we all agree on that point? Put it in there now?
What exactly do we say?
What-
I guess I
give
want to
us-
hear from a
give
planning
us, Mr.
perspective
Newcomb,
exactly,
what
Mr.
it-
Newcomb. And
What I would suggest is that since both of those districts front on a state highway, basically Route 9 and Route 33, is that direct ingress and egress must be maintained on, a state highways, 9 and 33.
at least one opening.
no.
Well, the state actually wants only one opening onto the major highways.
Well,
Go ahead, Mr.
I mean, that'll be, again,
You
we'll
need,
be
you
at
need
the...
emergency access through
We'll
the
be
back.
at the
honestly.
we'll be at the whims of DOT if it is corner property. You're right. I mean,
Like
the
we
state does have control whether they can deny a project access if it
Well, they
has an
will.
alternative.
But, sir, in all due respect, what you just said is what I've been told time and time again we cannot do. Make decisions based on this property. You just said the state with this property. I'm not talking about this.
You didn't say it's property.
I said a corner
He said
property.
any corner.
I
Any
thought you meant
corner
this
property.
I'm sorry.
Any corner.
Any
Any
Sorry,
corner.
Mr.
Any
Newcomb.
Any corner. But I think, in essence, that we could do that very simply by saying, direct ingress and egress must be maintained on state highways 9 or 33. And again, I mean, DOT, we could advance this to DOT, advise them of the township's decision and make them aware of it in terms of the permit bureau.
I would like to read this into the record. Came up on the internet. Monmouth County's newest full-service Holiday Inn Hotel, located in Hazlet, New Jersey, offers all the comforts of home and all the service to make every stay an absolute pleasure. Featuring 121 beautifully appointed guest rooms, including 2 executive rooms and 1 2-room executive suite with whirlpool. That's my room. In addition to complimentary high-speed internet access, all of our guest rooms provide all the thoughtful amenities you have come to expect from Holiday Inn hotels. Our 9,000-plus square foot of flexible meeting space accommodates corporate functions as small as 10 people or social functions as low as 500 people. Our professional catering experts are always available to make your corporate or social gatherings a memorable experience. The Bayshore Bar and Grill makes for a convenient dining or cocktail experience with an array of American fare that will delight the most discerning palate and please the pocketbook. In-room dining is available for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We also offer a state-of-the-art fitness facility, seasonal outdoor heated pool, and business center with high-speed internet access. It's 2 stories tall, folks. Okay? If you go on the internet and look at Holiday Inn, it's 2 stories tall. So I'm tired of hearing quality hotels will not build under 6 stories. I do not want a gun put to my head and said either you do this or we're out. No guns will be put to my head in life.
But we're not at 6 stories. Where'd that come from? What does it include now? I keep
An article
hearing
in the
this.
paper today said that if it wasn't 6 stories high, they wouldn't build here, they'd go down the road.
We'll let him go down the road.
There was an article in the newspaper today.
I think a couple of things.
I'm going to be the lone dissenter on this, but I'll wait till he's done with his report. We can each talk like he started.
There's an article in the paper today saying if it's
I haven't
not,
seen it.
from the attorney from Fox and Rothschild, said if it wasn't 6 stories that were built, that they would go down the road. Well, I'm tired of hearing a quality hotel won't build a beautiful hotel with the second story, with 2-story. Holiday Inn.
All right, hold on, everybody, we can't.
So that's all. Thank you very much, Chuck. I really appreciate it.
Mrs. Shoemaker, you're up next. What comments or questions do you have?
No, I believe that everything that we had discussed and debated on April the 20th has been addressed by Mr. Newcomb. The only thing that was a concern was the access to the highway, which we discussed, but it wasn't put in under the ordinance, which I think does need to be put in there.
Okay. All right, Mr. Malave.
I think we've come a long way. Obviously, we're listening to the residents as well as the professionals. The only thing that I do have a slight problem with is the minimum lot size. I know we bumped it up from 3 to 5. Me personally, I like to see it at 7. I think that a 5, it's borderline. It scares me to think that we have 6-acre zoning, and we be allowed to build 1 residential home on a 6-acre lot, but we can build a hotel on 5 acres. So that concerns me a little bit. So, again, just a suggestion, I'd like to see at 7, unless Mr. Newcomb, you as a professional, see a problem with that.
I don't see an overarching problem.
I think we still have quite a few 7-acre lots on Route 33 and possibly on Route 9 that a hotel or a conference center such as this one could go in on. So why 7 for 5? That's just my opinion. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor, can I just play devil's advocate here? If you go to 7 acres and you have a maximum improvement coverage, 70,
70%.
and a floor area ratio of 35, that could be a pretty big building, though, right? So you got to look at these things in terms of the ramifications. It's unless you put in a square footage max.
Or lower the improvement coverage, Tom?
Well, that's what I'm saying. The 70%, all of these things kind of run off each other. The 70% is basic, and I know Chuck certainly knows his stuff is based on what's out there for the most part, but have you ever consolidated some lots? I'm just playing devil's advocate here when you're looking at things and twisting and turning, that you got to look at all the ramifications.
But that would be a maximum coverage of 70%. Obviously, nobody has to go up to the maximum. They could do less of the coverage.
Obviously, but they could, it may be a Taj Mahal, who knows, but I'm saying,
They're
can we take...
restricted to the height anyway, so, I don't have an issue with them spreading out, just as long as they don't go above the 50.
There may be ways of, maybe putting a cap on the square footage, like we did, like we're looking at with the...
that's a good suggestion.
With the retail.
Right. I think that's the way to go, is to suggest that no single-use structure should exceed X square footage, but that is something that ought to be handled under the general ordinance for that zone. And it's consistent with what's being recommended as part of the master plan process.
I just want to clarify that the intent here is not to chase anybody away that wants to come in here and do the right thing for the community. I do agree with Mr. Walsh that we need to protect our residents. It has been proven time and time again that a quality hotel can be built and with some restrictions, obviously. And I am in favor of a hotel. I've been campaigning for a hotel since I got elected, and prior to that as well. But we do need to protect the residents, especially in the borderlines of Highway 9 and Route 33. And I think that this piece of legislation here would serve just that, and it would not chase away a quality hotel from coming into town.
Anything else, Mr. Malave?
No, sir.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Tabasco, comments from Mr. Newcomb?
Actually, first a number of statements, and I'm going to tell you straight out to the rest of you that I'm going to be a huge dissenter from the rest of you.
Well, you don't know, I haven't spoken yet.
Oh, yeah, well.
I haven't commented yet.
Okay. So hear me out for a few minutes, and then we can have some back and forth on this. But listen, we have some issues on Highway 9, we have some issues on Highway 33, and the issues are that there's no depth to the lots on either highway. When Juan talks about protecting the residents, right now half our residents can't afford to live in this town, and the other half is getting ready to move out too. So protect the residents. One of the things we need to do, hold off, people. The number one issue remains to this day taxes. Now, you know I did a bunch of knocking last week, and you said open space was the number one issue. It isn't. It is the number 3 issue. The number one issue is still taxes.
Let me finish. No,
I'm not picking on you. I'm saying open space is still a big one, but the number one issue remains taxes. Number 2 is roads.
I know that.
Number 3 is open space. I can tell you that straight out right now. So when we say protect the residents, there's 52,000 of them out there that are saying, help me. 72% of the taxes right now goes to schools. A greater percentage than for the town goes to the county. Goes to the county library, goes to the fire district. There's only 11% that actually comes out of our municipal coffers, or off the people's shoulders towards the municipal coffers, I should say. But even so, with such a little percentage, the people still want to be protected. They want us to help them not have even that percentage. And one way to do it is to attract ratables. When Tom is bringing up about a universal overall plan for the highway districts, HD1, HD2, HD3, I think is the way to go. A lot of this discussion as to whether something should be this high or this wide on a spot basis, lot by lot, doesn't make any sense to me. Sort of analogous to us doing the budgets and having department heads come, without us having done the efficiency review of the audit. So what I'm here to say is that, look, I'm not going to tell a quality hotel how to manage their business. I don't want to discourage them from coming to our town. Over the last number of years, I can name a bunch of things that didn't come here because we constantly discourage business from coming here, and we still have people crying about taxes. We lost the Field of Dreams. We lost the soccer complex. Right? We have the Field of Dreams actually looking again to come back right this very second. But what they want is a good hotel conference center that will support that. The height, when you look at the Global Corporate Center, which used to be the Union Valley building right next to Southern's fire station, the height above sea level, because it's on top of a hill, it's got to be 100 feet up already. You have the towers on Highway 9, the lights that support Interstate 195, 125 feet up. I think it's a red herring to talk about whether we should be under 50 feet or not as being disgusting if it's 52 feet or 54 feet. There are many ways to make even tall buildings look right. And then tonight I've heard this discussion about impervious surface. If you go wide, you have more impervious surface. If you go high, you have less impervious surface. You can't talk out of both sides of your mouth. There's one or the other. Again, there's a difference. I know Bobby talked about this 2-story hotel in Hazlet. That might be fine for Hazlet. It might have been a big piece of property. We do not have that on Highway 9 and Highway 33. We have no depth to the properties. The only way to get quality hotels on those 2 highways is to go up. So what is reasonable as to what's too high or not? I don't think it's 50 feet. If a quality hotel says we need 6 stories in order to put this center in, and we're going to leave, you don't let us, that's probably the realm of reasonableness as to how high a hotel should be. I'm totally against 50 feet. I'm totally against 4 stories. It should be somewhere in the neighborhood of what a quality hotel is telling us would be the right height. So they're saying, hey, we want 6 stories, 60 to 70 feet. In my mind, that would be about the right height if they could build the structure where we're going to be able to have an identity-creating site for people to have weddings and whatever else that they might have there, for all our meetings to have meeting space. Right now we have our house tavern, we have the Southern Firehouse, they hold 225 people, and we are discouraging this hotel conference center, if we're going to talk about one, from coming here because we're building a mousetrap that we can't get anything in. Just like with the age-restricted housing. If we make too many restrictions and none of it comes in, what did we really do? We killed ourselves again with regards to taxes, again trying to protect the residents. The way to protect the residents, number one way, is to give them tax relief. So me being on EDC for a lot of years and being very pro-business and trying to take the burden of taxation off of people's shoulders, I think we're way out of line and misreading, because we have a vocal amount of people that come to this room, we're misreading the will of the other 52,000 people. We're misreading the will of a lot of organizations out there that want to be able to go somewhere and have functions. So I'm totally against that. Everything else seems to fit. I don't necessarily disagree with your 7 acres. That's fine. I like the minimum lot width at 500 feet. I think the height thing, we're building a mousetrap that we cannot bring in a good rateable. And that one hotel conference center, now if we're going to talk about one specifically, will draw a lot of other business to this town. And again, there's an entity called the Field of Dreams that actually left our town a couple years ago because there was nothing to support it, that would come back if they had something like this here. So that's two things that could happen based on one amenity going up. So again, I'll get back to the original point. I kind of like Tom's idea, which is let's go to the town, let's get ideas as to what looks good, let's build this universal picture of structures, architecture, all up and down the zone. We have the frontages all the same, they're not one distance up, one distance back. You know, we have a certain look to the way, maybe like Freehold Township did with Walmart and Sam's, where they had to build a certain look to it. That's how we should go and make it universal for everything, not just to the hotels like we're doing here. All right, so I think I've said enough. You got my feeling. I may be different from all of you, but, you know, I'm very pro-business right now and helping the people out. And their number one issue, they keep telling me, is taxes.
The only comment I'll make is that I appreciate the statement from Hazlitt, but that's a marketing piece of literature. In my professional job, I'm in marketing, and people get paid to write things that sound wonderful and have a good spin to them, although I appreciate what they have done. I don't think we should be influenced by what another town may do or may not do, because someone could argue that there's some large city that has these great big hotels and don't they look beautiful, and shouldn't we have them? I'm concerned about what makes sense for Howell Township. If a developer wants to come here, be they commercial or residential, and they don't like the conditions, and I have great respect for my colleague, Mr. Tabasco, if they don't like the conditions, then they can go someplace else. We're not here to cater to what someone would like us to do. We're here to do what we think is right. There may be times that when we agree that a certain building or a certain kind of amenity is good for the town.
I don't necessarily disagree. I just think the reasonableness as to what it should be is a little off right now.
But I think I haven't seen today's Asbury Park Press, but if a developer is making a statement, you're either going to do it my way or I'm going to hightail it out of here, well then you say goodbye, and you say, then I'm sorry, it can't be worked out. Perhaps you really didn't want to do business in our community in the first place, because we have to do what's right for the town, not what a developer may attempt to communicate in the newspaper. I think with respect to this issue, we do need to attract the right kind of rateables to the community. And the fact is, we have a highway zone for a reason. It's there to attract a certain kind of commercial rateables. It is there to bring certain services and amenities to people that live within the area so they can get their access locally in their own community. But we do need to make certain that it fits the look and the feel and the fabric of the community. I happen to agree that 4 stories high is a fairly amenable compromise, and I do think that the many of the alterations that we've made are in the right direction. That it's good that we took this process. We got good comments from people that have great experience, like Mrs. Weitgruber and others, on ways to make this better, and we've listened, and we're making every effort to make them better. That's how this process works. I also just want to continue to emphasize that, at least from my judgment, I think everyone feels the same way on this. This is not about a property on 195 that has a backyard near Winston Park. It's not about that. If it is, then we're all here making a big mistake. It's about constructing a framework that governs how hotels can and should be able to operate in any highway zone in the municipality. That's what we have to talk about. We can't look at any particular piece of property. We have to look at the big picture and all of the highway zones. And believe it or not, someone lives near all of them. So the same issues that someone may have because they've read about an article in the paper, the people who live off certain portions of Route 33 are going to feel the same way when somebody wants to come in and put a hotel on 33. They're going to say, I don't want it there. Or they're going to be concerned about the traffic. So we have to be sensitive to all these things. And so I'm of the mind that at its present constitution, this is a much better working draft. We're going to hear from the residents again on this to get more public input. And I do think that we do need to put a limitation behind the total square footage. I'm the person that asked for the square footage maximum ordinance to be placed on big box stores. The Borough of Carteret passed a similar piece of legislation. And I think it's a wonderful idea, and I think the way to govern how big these hotel or conference centers can be is is to have some reasonable number of total square footage, a la what we're going to talk about later on tonight. But without any further delay, Mr. Janetzky, if you have a presentation you'd like to make to us, I'll turn the floor over to you, sir.
That has to do with the next item, Mayor.
Oh, it's on the next item.
Related to this,
Okay.
but I think in terms of consensus, the consensus that I'm getting here is that minimum lot size is to be 7 acres, and that access is required off a state highway for, and this is where we need some guidance. I guess I'll throw out for discussion any single-purpose freestanding building in excess of 10,000 square feet. Or just to give you a sense, a typical
Yeah, what's
CV
10,000
right,
square foot?
A typical
Probably about
CVS, a new CVS is about I think about 6,000 to 9,000 square feet.
I mean, what would best practices recommend from a planning perspective, knowing the concerns that we've had from our residents?
Chuck, do you have thoughts?
In terms of the square footage?
A minimum required to have highway access.
Highway access, yeah.
The only issue, that concern I have are corner lots. I mean, DOT is going to probably, force you to go off of the, onto the municipal road. For example, a corner lot, say at Friendship or somewhere like that, in essence, they're going to force you onto Friendship Road.
Mayor, maybe I can, the issue is how are you going to frame the access? Is that what you're talking about, Tom?
Right.
Well, all I can say is if you're particularly concerned with uniformity, that's the way to go. But if this is a conditional use ordinance, I don't see a legal impediment to making that a condition of this particular use.
Right. If it doesn't,
In other words, and then we can deal with other highway development type of situations, but you can make this a conditional use by saying the access egress
Okay, so
must be on a State Highway 9 or whatever, subject to obviously the DOT, but
okay, and then
so
that's another alternative.
just a note for when we do the regular zoning that we're going to have to discuss for non-conditional uses like a hotel. What size would you want to consider non-highway access?
The way that we've framed this is a conditional use.
Right, okay, so that's for another day.
Right, this is a conditional use, so it has to meet the conditions, or else it's a use variance.
Right.
Somebody get a window. It's hot up here, it is.
Okay,
So did you have your direction in terms of the highway access? What was it, what's the right square footage? Is it 9,000, is it 10,000?
that's not relevant to this
It's
use.
not,
because
so what
this is
Tom
a-
said is
this
it's
a
not, doesn't apply.
conditional use.
Okay. Are there anything else by way of direction that you gentlemen need from the council?
No, council's okay, we'll proceed with preparing an ordinance for introduction.
All right,
Can I ask what you are adding to what you've already given us now, Chuck? Please,
Okay.
Mr. Newcomb.
Okay. We've changed the acreage from 5 to 7.
Thank you.
Okay. The minimum lot width is 500 feet, not 450.
Mm-hmm.
And we've added a provision, I think I would add it under H3 or wherever the attorney thinks it should be, is direct ingress and egress must be on Route 9 or 33.
And it's going to be 4 stories and 50 feet, is that accurate?
Yeah, that's what we had.
That was already in there.
Yeah.
And did we address, or does it address no kitchens in all the rooms?
It addresses, in terms of the definition of hotel, it talks about overnight lodging to the general public for compensation with or without meals and egress to all rooms supervised. It says private bath. We don't restrict, or it doesn't restrict kitchens.
That's the only thing I would add. Should we restrict kitchens to all rooms?
Well, wait a minute. You don't want
Hold
kitchens.
on, please, folks.
You don't want kitchens.
Don't want kitchens.
Okay.
I mean, what we want
But
kitchen.
let me,
What about a residence inn or, NBC,
I'm just asking.
Yeah.
I want someone like the,
my own...
Yeah, we're building a mousetrap that nobody's ever going to come. What's the point? We might as well not have any ordinance, because they're never going to come.
The
The
way I
really
look at
nice
it-
ones are not going to come.
The way I look at the kitchen issue is the people that know what will sell best are the people that are in the hotel business.
That's exactly right.
And in my judgment, I mean, I've done some business travel. In any hotel, there's a certain number of rooms that have a little kitchenette, a certain number of rooms that don't. And I've done travel in many, many states. And I know if I'm going to be away for an extended 4 or 5 period of time, I like to be able to have the coffee pot or maybe buy a couple of bottles of water or a 6-pack of Diet Pepsi and stick it in a refrigerator and maybe heat something up. Or if I'm going to be away for a week away from home and not go out every night, it's more conducive for business travel. When we go on vacation with my kids, the only place that we stay is a place that has a little kitchen, because there's many mornings we can't afford to go out. We'll have breakfast right in the hotel room, and we'll prepare meals for the kids when it isn't conducive to go out for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So I think that to restrict not having kitchens at all, I think is a mistake. And I don't think that we should have. They're going to build luxury stoves and ovens, and people are going to go to a hotel to bake cakes.
Yeah, I think the concern that was raised by the residents was the welfare motel experience,
there's a lot
right?
of them in Monmouth County.
Yeah,
But didn't we
and
put something-
what we did do was we restricted the stay to
14 days.
days.
Yeah, you can't stay there more than 14 days.
Right. So we did redo that. We restricted the length of stay to 14 days.
The minimum amount of
The
rooms.
last person to get thrown out of a hotel room was somebody paying their tab.
Well,
Well,
The last person to get thrown out is somebody paying their tab. Let's cut to the chase.
but I would sense, if we go back and read that lovely advertisement you talked
It was
about,
beautiful.
someone who is going to quote-unquote use this as a welfare motel is not going to be able to afford the quote-unquote dining for everyone's palate.
I'm going to stay here tomorrow. The Bay Shore Bar and Grill makes for a convenient dining or cocktail experience.
Well, there you go.
I'll be there tomorrow.
The average person who wants to use this as a welfare motel is probably not going to be going there for cocktails and shrimp.
I don't like using that word, but I would add that I think we've put two ingredients in there. One, we have limited it to 60. It has to be a minimum of 60 rooms. I think that's one. And the other one is the 14-day. And I have to agree with you in some instance that as long as somebody's paying, they're not going to there's no way to police that issue. I don't think but I think that the matter of 60 rooms, a minimum, tells you what type of hotel that you're addressing.
Yeah, I mean, if we have a hotel that has a 60-room minimum, with all due respect to someone who's paying the bill, the last thing that a flagship brand hotel wants to attract is someone that is using it as a permanent residence, no matter their level of income. The way that these places make money is that they have people coming and going and using the different services and the amenities. So I think we're trying to micromanage being in the hotel business. We've put I think our objective is to protect the residents and the people who are in the surrounding areas from the ramifications of having a hotel near where they live. But, I mean, for that matter, why don't we talk about the kind of cocktail peanuts they can put on the bar? I mean,
I was going to get to that next.
That's why I raise it. Salted, unsalted. Do we want to change anything in the kitchens, or are we okay with this?
I just want to remind everybody that this is written for highway development zones, not residential zones. It's written for the highway development zones.
I think do we have any? Does anyone want to make a change for
No.
not having kitchens? Okay.
No, Mayor.
All right.
Yeah, I just want to throw it out there.
Okay,
It was
that's fine.
And you know what?
It's good discussion.
I'm okay. I don't even want to make the change now that I thought about it.
All right, is there anything else on the hotel issue? So you're going to prepare a draft for us to consider for introduction, and you'll work out the dates with Mr. Davis and Mr. Chernetsky with respect to when we can introduce this?
Yeah.
Fair enough? All right, do we need Mr. Newcomb for this next discussion topic?
Yes.
Okay, we do. Well,
Yes.
Yeah, keep her around.
So make yourself comfortable, Mr. Newcomb.
Okay. The
Mr.
next-
Chernetsky, go ahead.
The next item, Mayor, is council had requested an ordinance that would limit single retail stores to 125,000 square
Well,
feet.
not council, Joe.
Yes, I requested, I don't want to get
Not the
yeah, no,
council.
others may disagree with me.
I
so
don't want to show
This was me.
When I heard the conversation that was going on about that, and when we researched the even aspects of the hotel issue,
Folks, could you hold on one second? We've got to make sure we give Mr. Janetsky our attention, please.
it was clear to me that I think what this community really needed was a cohesive set of design standards for the Route 9 corridor. I think, Mayor, the point you were making is that some of these big box stores were simply pulling the life out of the character of the community, and I think a lot of people in our profession would agree with you, and that they need to be regulated. But the fact is, I think all of Route 9 needs to be more tightly regulated in order to create a vision and a sense of place. And quite frankly, the residents who live near Route 9, I think, are rightfully concerned, given the quality of some of the architecture and community design that's been installed in their backyards. And I think, I'm convinced myself, based on numerous studies and examples, that we can design Route 9 in such a way that complements the residential areas. I mean, I'm not talking about heights here or anything like that. I'm talking about architectural detail that sets a tone and a sense of place that actually complements the residential neighborhoods, so that we're not necessarily putting up barriers. The studies that I've read where uniform design standards have been consistently implemented, you have, first of all, people willing to build smaller scale in order to get into the neighborhood.
All right.
Willing to make a lot more investments in the quality of a place to be a part of it. Rents are higher, and vacancy rates are lower, and surrounding residential property values increase. And why it might seem I'm beating a dead horse here if everyone agrees, well, the fact is that a lot of communities are hesitant about adopting community design standards. They're hesitant about telling people what their buildings ought to look like. But more and more, it's starting to happen. And I will tell you that communities absolutely profit by having it. The planning board went through the exercise of, I guess, endorsing a preliminary set of standards. And I don't know how long it will take us to adopt all the zoning codes. So what I am recommending to the council is that we break it up, and the very first item we pursue is the community design standards that are applicable to commercial development in our community. This isn't a comprehensive report on what's been proposed, but I just wanted to give you a little flavor. And as we develop the ordinance, what we will do is we will have a visual, what we call a pattern book in the zoning office. So for when applicants come in, they can read something, and then they'll have a picture indicating exactly what it is we're referring to. In the past, my understanding is that applicants aren't required to provide architectural elevations and drawings of retail spaces. They may do so if they want, but we're not in a custom of requiring them to do it. I think that's absolutely critical that we do it, and that's also in the ordinance. So let me just show you some of the things that Chuck has come up with. Mr. Newcomb, sorry.
That's right. You can- Chuck, sorry. I know who I am.
I call him Chuck, you can.
That was good.
While we're waiting,
That's a pretty big box. It's about 4 by 5.
Mayor, while we're waiting, I'll indicate that I represent a couple planning boards, and they have, in other towns, that have some designs, and they also have an architect that reviews it, charges the escrow, and they seem to, it seems to be something that's worthwhile, especially with bigger, projects and, malls and that type of thing, strip malls. You have an architect that, they pay a fee to the architect, he reviews it, makes sure it's in compliance with the facades and the architectural design standards.
one thing that, just some of the highlights from what's going to
Mr.
be
Janetzky, if you could
proposed.
just pull the mic back closer to where you were, please.
Some highlights from what's going to be proposed. That commercial property should be designed to enhance the overall character of adjoining neighborhoods. It's worked before, Mayor.
There you go.
Well, I'll just read what you can't see. The ordinance starts off with the idea of massing. Building wall offsets, projections, and recesses shall be provided at least every 50 feet to provide architectural interest and relieve the negative visual effect of a single long wall. The example on the left would be something that we're trying to avoid, and on the right is an example of something we want to encourage.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Sorry?
That's beautiful.
Okay, and you should know, by the way, that that is a single building.
Mm-hmm.
And that is White Marsh in Maryland, where a mall was failing, and they decided to build a main street in the middle of their parking lot, and the area is just thriving. Parking lots. Asphalt should be screened from view, and barriers should be provided for pedestrian safety. Walkways. All lots shall have walkway access to a right-of-way that is designed for the safety, control, and efficient movement in order to promote pedestrian circulation. Roof lines. Roof lines should be used to add interest and reduce massive scale of large buildings. So we already started some of that. And just across the way, in the same parking lot, is something we'd like to avoid. And clearly, you can see how the difference between the two does. The one on the top left certainly might do something for an adjoining residential neighborhood,
Absolutely.
where the one on the right, which is about 35 feet tall, does nothing. It actually hurts surrounding neighborhoods, in my opinion. Horizontal cornices. All visible exposed sides of a building shall have an articulated base course and cornice. If you ever go into a traditional downtown, and perhaps the one everyone is very familiar with here is Palmer Square in Princeton, where you have buildings of various heights, but the thing that unifies them is a cornice line. And again, we have an example, a good example in town, of the Barnes & Noble bookstore. The next item is corner buildings. Corner buildings are a very important architectural feature and community design feature. It should be, and it will be in the codes, considered a significant structure. And 2 facades will be required, as opposed to 1 blank wall. These buildings may have additional height relating to the corner. Details matter. We're going to, although you can have different designs of buildings, you can even have modern buildings, but as long as you have some unifying patterns like windows, vertically proportioned windows as opposed to horizontal, you can create a sense of harmony. You also want to do other things that make a place seem more realistic, like making sure that shutters might actually fit the windows they're intended to close. Commercial signs. We want to encourage monument signs, such as the one you see on the right.
Top right.
Sorry, yeah, on the top right. And that's very doable. And you want the lighting to be backlit, so the letters at night show through only the letters show through and not the background, as you see over here. Oh, there we go. How about that?
East Gas by exit 4.
As I drive around Route 9, I see various attempts to introduce classic street lighting. But in an area of 1 mile, I've noted about 7 different varieties. In the design standards, we're going to identify one. We're going to ask you to pick one, and that's going to be the standard. And again, you can have different types of buildings, but there's certain elements that unify it. Windows, lights. Okay. And I think this is the absolute key. I recently attended a seminar about green cities in Asia, where you just see this unbelievable lush green hanging over highway bypasses. And the point is that green space belongs everywhere. And open spaces are appropriate for all zones. It's just a matter of proper design and proper amenities. So we need to allow for places where people can go enjoy a cup of coffee under a shaded tree, and we'll be calling for that as well. This, by the way, is Seaside, Florida. That's my wife. If it looks remotely familiar, it was featured in the movie called The Truman Show with Carrie. No, it's a real town. It's an award-winning place, and they include a lot of these design features. It was a private investment to demonstrate that it can be done successfully. This is Ruskin Square, which, in my opinion, is one of the most comfortable public spaces I've ever been in. Okay, and that sort of wraps up the key features of what the community design standards will be calling for. You will get a more detailed booklet from us, but if council is so inclined, may I recommend that that's the first part of the master plan that you implement?
I think the answer is yes. Does anyone disagree?
No.
Go for it. Great work. That's tremendous.
Really is. I can relax there right now.
The proportions, by the way, are based on the square in St. Mark's in Venice. That the architects and planners went to Europe and they studied northern Italian towns to lay out the absolute dimensions of these places.
So how much, from a timing perspective, the master plan was just passed by the planning board last week, so there's a process by the time it gets to us. But when do you think we may see sort of a first draft from a timing perspective on this whole layout standard?
No longer than a month.
Great. Okay.
For a first draft.
Any other questions from the council?
Any of those buildings taller than 50 feet?
This building here, which you can't really see, is a bottom floor retail, second story office, and top two floors, there are 4 stories, townhomes, a 2-story townhome. And they sell for in excess of $1 million apiece. This is the world's smallest post office in the United States, and it's kind of neat.
Like a mausoleum.
Have you been to Adelphia?
Smaller than that.
Excellent.
All right. Good work, fellas. Gentlemen, please. Thank you.
That's town hall in a couple months.
All right, on 10-2,
We just covered it.
we sort of just covered that. The planning board did issue a statement supporting the request to this limitation of 125,000 square foot. Mr. Chernetsky, what's the best way to act on that? Is that a part of what you're recommending be in the, quote, design standard?
The design standards are going to set a maximum building footprint for a single-use freestanding building, that it's actually far lower than that. So I think in terms of regulating existing big boxes, I think it ought to be pursued. I think if council's inclined, we're ready to act on it, and it doesn't, in other words, it doesn't conflict with what we're doing.
Okay.
Well, the case I'd like to make very briefly on 10-2 is that these large big box stores, we have our share of them. We know that they can bring in a certain amount of economic ratables. They bring jobs. There's nothing wrong with having a nice size retail store. I think 125,000 square foot is an appropriate size, and yet it can ensure that we're not allowing the kind of entities that come in that sell every single product that someone could ever consume to the detriment of all of the other businesses that make up the community. So I'd like us to see pursuing this 125,000 square foot, a very brief limited ordinance that speaks to it in the highway zones. We do have the blessing of the planning board that I believe unanimously agreed, and with the council's agreement, I'd like to ask Mr. Chernetsky to have the planner prepare the appropriate ordinance language to back it up, but I'll turn it over to the council for discussion.
You going left to right or right to left?
We'll go as,
Give me a break on this.
yeah, we'll start off with Mr. Malave. We don't want to overwork Mr. Walsh.
Well, I'm trying to visualize 125,000 square feet. Obviously, it's 100 by 125, but
What's it? We have anything that big?
do we have anything near that here in town? Kohl's, Target,
A typical.
Walmart, I don't know.
Yeah, Walmart's pretty
Walmart.
close.
Thank you.
ShopRite's about 75, I would gather.
Yeah, the average, I'm told, the average grocery store is less. The large end Lowe's are that size, of which we have. The large end Home Depots are this size, we have 2. And there's one in neighboring Freehold. We have a Walmart.
I just want, again, Mayor, the reason that inspired so much thought was the idea is even if a business happens to come along and say to the good people on the zoning or planning board, look, we absolutely have to do this or we're leaving, we can then say, but where's the public space? Where's the cornice lines? Where's the detail? Where's the stuff that's going to make you look like you're part of the community? And it really provides the boards with a tool to negotiate
So your thing
with
is
these
it doesn't have to be limited to 125,000 square foot. We don't have to have that kind of a hard cap if all of these other design standards address making it fit, so to speak.
Yeah, my feeling is as the highway evolves, and there's a visual pattern that's very attractive, you will get applicants who will be willing to build something less than standard to fit in, and you see that everywhere, where places are acknowledged as being very well designed. People will come in and build less, but they're going to push the envelope. And as they push the envelope, you have a set of tools that you can really put to them and ask them to improve the quality of the community. So my feeling is that, look, typical big boxes now are in a neighborhood of 200,000 square feet. You put in restrictions, and then you're going to get a much better product in the end. So I have no concerns about the restrictions.
Okay.
No.
Does anyone disagree to have them put the restrictions in the draft ordinance?
Or of what?
125,000 square foot being the largest size
Right.
store.
We prepared a draft ordinance. I don't know if it's before you or not, but
If they wanted, say somebody did want to come in, could they go before the zoning board and ask for a variance? Is that not correct?
yeah, they can actually probably get it from the planning board.
Okay. So
Or
if
the
somebody
zoning
wanted to
board.
go above it and there was something good for the town, the planning board and zoning board could approve it. Right?
That's correct.
They could
God
consider
bless
it, sure.
May I just have one question? Maybe Chuck can address this too, or
He's
Tom.
gone. Oh,
We prepared the ordinance,
it's in here.
and we go through neighborhood commercial zone, the HC zone, and the HD1 zone. Was there an HD2 we want to deal with, or is that's too small in any event?
Chuck, are you familiar with that?
This is for the 125,000.
We don't really permit any retail or anything like that
Okay.
in the HD2.
The other question I have is, do we need to maybe put some definitions into our ordinance? It says no individual retail store. I'm assuming are we talking about a single-use store like a Lowe's, or are we talking about the box itself that has multiple tenants? That's what I'm trying
That's
to...
what, that's my
I think-
clarification, because I wanted to make
Well,
sure that we
I-
weren't talking about a strip mall that was going to inhibit small individual businesses.
It should be
think
freestanding, single-purpose
Freestanding,
retail
single
store.
Okay.
Maybe we can, in conjunction with this,
Business
then
person.
put in a definition so there's no ambiguity.
Yeah, that's a good point. This is single
because
standing.
I think also we don't want to discourage mixed use,
That's right.
within the building.
All right, so why don't you guys offline work out the details, and when you're ready and you think it's
All
ready
right.
for us to introduce it, then we'll do that.
Those design standards are very important that we get that going.
Well, it sounds like they've got it going, and they're going to have it to us within a month or so. Okay.
Wonderful.
Anything else for Mr. Newcomb, or can this poor fellow drive home now?
Keep around.
There's the last item of, Mayor, we have to address the issue of heights.
So why don't we
On a
jump to
highway.
that and do 10-6 right now, since we have Mr. Newcomb here.
Well, wait, I wanted to still
I'm
talk
sorry,
about
go
this
ahead, Pete.
125,000 square.
I'm sorry, you're right, go ahead.
we started talking about this a few weeks back, and then on that night, I think Bobby and I actually agreed that it wasn't necessarily good to, again, restrict businesses from being able to compete the way they would see right. He's talking about doing this community development picture, and I think as long as you put in parameters like that architecturally, why should we tell somebody not to come here? You're saying it might drive competition away. The counter to that is it actually attracts more people to our area, so everybody benefits from it. I got to tell you, I was in Sam's this weekend, and as comparison to the previous Sam's, there's a lot more there, and there's also a lot more traffic going to that area, and there's all those little strip malls around there now that are actually benefiting from it, all the restaurants and stuff. And they did have a lot more stuff in it, so I agree with it in that. But is that necessarily bad? I don't necessarily agree with that. Just like having a good hotel draws traffic to your area. So as long as you put parameters on the architecture, why are we stopping capital? Why are we stopping free trade?
The only comment that I'll make, and you raise a good point, and it's a great argument, is drive around any community, see if you can find yourself a local hardware store.
Well,
they don't exist.
You can't win that now. I mean, that's
They don't exist. And I mean, there could be some minor exceptions. I think there's a small that's been around for 100 years somewhere in Red Bank, but they get by not because they're in the hardware business. They get by because it's a family business and they keep it operating.
The counter to that is, as you know, I spent 20 years in the IT industry. 90% of the jobs are in India and Pakistan and Malaysia now. So that free trade was not stopped.
But the concern I have with these larger big box stores is that we still have a pretty vibrant business community where someone that just sells electronics and we have someone that just sells groceries, and I don't want to see those businesses become obsolete.
You raised a great point. Why don't we get their input from the chamber members and have them tell us whether they feel a big box store like the Sam's and Freehold actually is going to hurt them or help them. I think you're thinking it's going to hurt, and I'm thinking it's going to be just the opposite. It's going to help because you're attracting more people to the area. As long as you have what Tom's talking about, some architectural design to it, which is appealing.
I'm sorry.
I think it's the counter what you're thinking.
Realize that the design standards, you don't get variances from those. You request waivers.
Mm-hmm.
So the smaller you can require the building, the less inclined. If someone's requesting a variance for the
that
site,
Walmart and that Sam's right now were designed to Freehold Township specs. It wasn't the typical Sam's or Walmart.
Right, but assume a big box comes in and they're requesting something in excess of 125,000 square feet through a bulk variance, then they'll be less inclined to deviate from the design standards and request a waiver. They'll be more inclined to stick with them. And I would tell you that the long-term value of Route 9 is dependent upon us starting to implement that uniform design.
I agree there.
I agree.
I don't think I have any disagreement on that. I don't know if I want to restrict.
So what's the pleasure of the council? Do you want to send something to the Chamber of Commerce to solicit their input on having a limit of 125,000 square foot? Do we not want to do that?
Or any limit.
The last time I heard from the Chamber of Commerce, they wanted 6-story places all over 9 and 33. All right, so why would I want to send anything to them? And I'm a member of the Chamber of Commerce.
It doesn't mean you're right and they're wrong.
No, it's okay. Just so you know, I do have a little bit of a difficult time in limiting the size, but I'm very comfortable that they can go to the planning board and zoning board. I'm sure if Walmart wanted to build a super Walmart on 33 down near Collinswood auction, I mean, but if they did, and they went to the planning board and zoning board and it fit what we wanted, I mean, they would grant the variance. So they'd have the ability to. And as long as, I'm okay with it.
Protection from what, though? What's the layer of protection from? What are we protecting?
I agree with the mayor. That was a beautiful little hardware store. I just shed a tear.
We don't really
the
have
little
that
hardware
many,
store in Farmingdale. I used to stop in all the time. I know, I used to stop in that hardware store all the time. I was buying things for my wife.
All right, do you want to send it to the Chamber, yes or no? No. Mr. Malabi, send it to the Chamber, yes or no?
What are you sending to the Chamber?
Whether your idea about, what do you think about having a limitation on square footage to get their input?
Look, I agree that we should have a maximum, but I don't know that 125 is the right number. I'm not convinced of that at this time.
Yeah, we're not looking for Mall of America like in Blooming.
It wouldn't hurt to get input from the Chamber, obviously. It wouldn't hurt to get input from them or anybody else, from the residents. But bear in mind, every little thing we do here, we always have to go and get an input from somebody, and at some point,
Make the decision.
you
Fight the
just
bullet.
have to make a decision and stick with it and live with it. But yeah, I mean, I'm in favor of input from anybody, basically.
I don't know.
The chamber obviously would be in favor of businesses, so I'm sure that they would have a better understanding of what sort of limitations we should have. So we'll take the input and we value it just like we value our residents' input. I mean, most of the Chamber of Commerce members are Howell Township residents as well.
Well, let me ask you, I'll ask it in a different way. Right now we have Walmart, which to me, compared to the other stuff that you just showed on that board, is an eyesore. Let's say they want to remedy that, but in remedying it, they want to add like 25,000 square feet. And they make it nicer, and actually makes the neighborhood nicer, and the whole area picks up as far as the look to it. Do we want to discourage that? Why?
You're not, because he told you they have the ability to go.
Well, again, and
Why build
And
a
this,
mousetrap where the reasonableness of what's normal now is being excluded?
because you're giving them a carrot. If they want to take their current building, let's say hypothetically they're at 100,000 square feet now, and they're permitted to go to 125, any building, then they're really not required to do any of the things we're calling for. So if you keep some kind of reasonable limit on it, and by the way, most big boxes now are coming in at 175 up to 200,000 square
I think the Sam's
feet.
167 or something.
And they are not inclined to invest in the beauty of their buildings. And I would tell you also that Route 130 in Burlington County is littered with abandoned stores that were poorly built.
Well, they're
and
not that.
very
They're
unattractive.
not like this new Sam's and Walmart.
Well, they're basically boxes. So you want the under this. So if they came in and needed a variance, at least we have something to point to. But we have a carrot and a stick.
I think the only disagreement we have, again, it comes to that word reasonableness. When we talk about the hotels, what's reasonable? 50 feet, 70 feet? Well, I think the industry knows better than we do as council people. What's reasonable on what the boxes want? I think they know better than we do. If we put some parameters on it to make it look right, that's fine. But why tell them how to run their business?
Why don't we do this just as a compromise? It sounds like we've got 125. I'm sorry? Is everything all right out there? All right.
No, I said, it just seems to me that what Mr. Tabasco is saying is sort of ridiculous.
All right, well,
You'll have your moment of time.
Business is running the business. It's
All right,
really
let's-
to run the town.
Mr. Chernetsky, why
Hey,
don't
agree with me.
why don't we do this? Let's proceed in this direction. Perhaps you can have a conversation with the president of the chamber. You know the background. Perhaps they can bring it up with their next executive meeting with their directors, so to speak, and they can memorialize in a memorandum any concerns they'd like to add into the record, so that as we continue to deliberate on this, we have a workshop on the issue, we see a first draft, we can embellish or incorporate their comments, all right? So
We will.
that'll be the compromise.
We'll do that for the next.
All right, 10, I'm sorry, so we still have to deal with this
10-6.
10-6. Mr. Newcomb, why don't you come back up? This is a commercial building height maximum issue where the town council is going to discuss commercial building heights. This primarily stems from the fact that through this hotel business, we discovered that unfortunately, unbeknownst to anybody, at least since I've been on the council, that there is no height restriction other than these side setbacks, which probably isn't enough to protect the interests of the municipality. And so we need some common sense and direction around what are the right height restrictions in the different zones, so we put some teeth back in the law. So with that, Mr. Chernetsky, I'm going to turn it back over to you again.
Okay. Well, again, I would just say that I don't think the single-story stuff is appealing to anybody. It's not. It doesn't retain its value. Many community designers, which is a subspecialty of planning, have a motto that says good architecture doesn't happen below 2 stories. So I'm inclined, and there's a. I would just say that the European standard for a lot of these places we spend thousands of dollars going to visit typically is a 4-story height. 4 to 5 stories, even in major cities.
What's
So-
interesting about what you're saying there, Tom, is that, I just went to Vegas. Every one of the hotels designed themselves like an Italian city, and they were all about 3-4 floors high.
Right.
And all had the common frontage like you're talking about.
There's a great book called Pattern Language written by a gentleman named Christopher Alexander, and he basically says, try not to exceed that, 4 stories. So, it's certainly a policy decision. Residents have some
So
opinions.
maybe that is what's reasonable.
See, I think 4 stories
But I
is
think-
ideal.
Now, let me just give you a little history,
Maybe.
too. My understanding is that although there's no restriction now, through the 90s, as far as the land use department was able to research for me, that unless something was adopted in the mid-90s, the ordinance revisions of 1990 called for 6 stories. And before that, it was 3 stories. So that's, or 35 feet, excuse me.
Can we have one meeting? You're going to have your chance in just a few moments.
Well, I mean, I can share with you the chart, and I'll put it in your package, the chart that I was given by the land use office. So, but, nevertheless, I would say anywhere between 2 and 4 stories is where you want to be. And that's a policy decision where you wind up.
Where would you like to see us wind up? I'm being honest.
Me?
You're a planner?
Well, I prefer 4 stories.
That's what you would like to see. Okay.
That gives the uniformity. You have the different.
Yes.
To have the multi-levels, it's not necessary.
I think if we're going to go with the hotel and conference centers, 4 stories, 50 feet, I think that we should just put that across the board, and, for commercial buildings as well. I mean, I can't see anybody building, say, a clothing store 4 stories high. Obviously, it's just not going to happen. And you're restricted to, the back footage and how much you're allowed. You have to have 500 feet because that's going to obviously fall under that category as well, under this ordinance. With the frontage being 500, minimum 500 feet and so forth, or the width, I should say, not the frontage. Frontage 250 feet.
Well, the other provision that you don't want to lose, I think, is your side yard and rear yard.
Absolutely.
Because of the way that basically lots are laid out in the township in these areas that we're discussing, that forces a limitation on the height of many buildings.
Versus the size,
So chances are 4, even 4, it's really pushing it. I mean,
Well, you have to have
although it may be allowed to be built, it may be restricted by, the.
By the
Yeah,
lot
you still need
size.
your fall zone.
By
You
lot
still-
size.
yeah, you still have to have
I
the
mean,
lot size.
you're going to, New Jersey is becoming a state of redevelopment, believe it or not. And you're going to probably see, a lot more redevelopment proposals, hopefully, within the township and within those corridors, as we are starting to see in a few cases. Again, like I said, the side yard and the rear yard really force, kind of a damper on what you can do in terms of height. So,
Do I need to read again about Monmouth County's newest full-service Holiday Inn hotel?
Sure. It's in a redevelopment area, by the way.
So you knew all about this hotel?
Yeah.
I wish you had told me about it before.
Well,
In your research, I wish you had laid a little bit of that on me, Mr. Newcomb.
well,
How big is that lot?
Pardon?
How big is that lot? Is it deeper than
I'm
2,000?
not
Is it
sure
wider than
exactly
2,000?
the details
We
of
have
the
very
lot
little
size
depth.
and anything
I don't know
like
what
that.
I'll be there tomorrow, Council
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor Tabasco. I'll
You
tell
can
you
get
what it was
that
all
information for us.
about.
Let me say this, there's also a 3.5-story option.
Nah, 4.
Right.
Where I've seen kind of a and the way to define that is that the 4th story is built into the roof line. And it presents as 3.5 stories.
Yeah.
I would stick with your 4, like Juan said.
Keep it as a standard.
Yeah.
That's what I like.
But, any more discussion on this? What's the discussion on 10.3?
We done with Mr. Nukin?
Go home.
Possibly. You can go home. I don't think anything
Well,
else.
Mr. Newcomb.
Good night, Mr. Newcomb.
You want to talk about paving? You want to talk about paving?
Good night, Mr.
That's more
Newcomb.
Bill's
Thank you.
cup of tea.
Thank you very much,
Good
sir.
night.
10.3, Broadcast Advisory Committee membership, that we're to discuss a request to include a representative of either the local or regional school boards on the Broadcast Advisory Committee. That's whether that makes sense or not. Now, I know Howell High School has a broadcast center in their high school now.
Yes.
So Tom, tell us a little bit about this.
Okay, the Broadcast Advisory Committee's last meeting, they passed along a recommendation. There's 5 members on the committee. 1 seat is currently vacant, and they would like to utilize the expertise that exists in the media centers of either the local school district or the regional high school district. So they're requesting that that seat be reserved for that individual, but that in order to do so, you would more than likely have to waive the residency requirement for that particular seat.
Because the person who might be teaching it wouldn't necessarily be a resident of the town.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Correct.
Be Marlboro or Freehold.
Well, I think we've discussed this before, but
Yeah, once before.
and we kind of got stumbled at that point that it would have to be, possibly would necessarily be, but there was a possibility that it would be a non-resident. However, the wealth of knowledge that they would bring to that advisory board would enhance.
Absolutely.
I would have no problem with the non-residency requirement being waived, just as long as it's limited to that one position, which would be a school representative, strictly that.
And that they
On that
teach either
particular
in
board.
they either teach in the regional or in the local district.
You could bring some talent into the meeting that
Correct.
would help us.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm okay with that, but they wouldn't be able to
Has
decide
anything
what goes on in the house. That's fine.
has anything been sent to
Would
either
that be a
school board?
voting member as well? I mean, would it be, would it be a
Pre-
full member,
presumably.
voting member, so forth?
Yes.
Yes.
Has anything already been sent to the school boards to see if there's interest?
I know Mr. Burke, the chairperson of the committee, has many contacts, does a great deal of volunteer work in the community, so it was his idea, and I know he has contacts, so if council was so inclined, recommendations would be forthcoming.
Okay.
Sounds like a good idea to me.
Excellent.
Go forward.
That-
And by the way, Mr. Burke does put a tremendous amount of volunteer
does.
time into that. He's passionate about what he is involved in there.
And I think this part, I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
go ahead.
just one more point, is this sort of helps move along the planning for Channel 77, where the next phase is to include community and educational programming, so that would really create a great link.
Good. Okay.
So we're done with 10.3.
Up to
Yes.
10-4.
10.4, I asked to put this on the agenda only in large measure in response to the continuous phone calls and emails and inquiries I get from residents about what are we doing to buy more open space and to preserve more farms. And it continues, and at least in what I'm hearing, next to taxes and road improvement, that open space preservation
Number 3.
continues to be on everybody's mind. And there are still quite a number of lots that have not yet been built out in the municipality, and we have preserved quite a bit of open space of late. When you look at Bonham, Lake Louise, and the Price property alone, it's 260, 270 acres, but there's still a long way to go. So we have passed 2 open space referendums already, and I wanted the council to consider putting a ballot question on for this year to allocate another penny to open space preservation. Now, in that discussion, what Mr. Chinesky was kind enough to remind me was that with the reevaluation, the tax rate may change already, and so we may naturally wind up having a larger portion of funds being allocated to the open space fund. So, Mr. Chinesky, I'm going to turn it over to you.
That's absolutely correct. It'd be almost like a 40% increase.
It could be, so
Right.
go ahead.
Now, first of all, let's not scare anybody.
No,
Let's
that's
say
right.
that's going to be a
proportion.
We don't know the outcome.
a
40% increase.
in
No, the money that
municipal
would go to open
taxes
space.
across the board.
Yeah.
Right. Not
So
to-
I have to do what I just can't stand doing is trying to explain the reval process.
right.
But basically, let's assume for a moment that we have $1 million budget, and we raise that $1 million based on the value of, let's say, the few properties in our town. And so we create a rate based on that formula.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say the value of those properties doubles. That doesn't mean our $1 million budget doubles.
No, it's the
Our
same.
need for, a budget stays more or less through the normal process, so the rate is adjusted. That's for the general municipal purpose budget. Now, in terms of the county open space, they can care less. If the values double, and I don't know what is the county open space tax, 2 cents? Well, the effect would be a doubling of what we're paying into the county open space tax.
In a flat dollar amount.
And their policy is that there's no adjustments that are made to that, as far as I know. At the municipal level, if we don't change, then the effect will also be a substantial increase in the amount of revenue that comes in. So yes, the mayor. Now, what typically what municipalities do is they go out and they buy their open space. They have a bond, and it's a mortgage essentially, and they set an open space tax to pay down the mortgage. And basically, that's something that we'll be doing as well, or proposing in the budget. So it's not recommended that we reduce what we currently have in light of new acquisitions, but I think you might want to move slowly on polling the residents on increasing it, because we're at a kind of a transitionary period.
So, Mr. Chensky, does it make sense that let me ask it this way, what's the latest that we could petition the county to have a question put on the ballot?
Like August something, right? August.
I think it's kind of a question for the clerk.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
What is the latest, Mr. Davis, that we could ask the county to put a question on the ballot for the November election?
I would have to consult chronological index, I can't tell you.
You have a general ballpark, is it a month? Kind of general.
Yeah, between 60 and 90 days.
So sometime in September. Will we know enough over the next month or two from the tax assessor about the direction where that may be leaning to determine whether it makes sense to put something on for a ballot question?
I thought he told us we wouldn't have any kind of, like till October or November. I thought that's what he told us.
I think that's when we'd have the final, but I don't know if they may have any preliminary. You think so?
After the election, probably.
Let's hope not.
I will tell you, generally speaking, and I've done this twice, assessors are reluctant to release any kind of guess until it's all done.
What are you doing? I would say not till October or November.
Well, what did he say last time? He had 40 to 45% done? Was that their number, I believe, when it came before us?
Sounds about right.
I don't remember.
I believe that's what they said, 40 to 45%, and they started like back in October, right? November? Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's one way of doing it, gearing it out and looking at the ratio and then figure it out the other way, but that's unscientific, but that might be able to give you an idea.
Well, we know that the current assessment is based on a $2.9 billion property in aggregate value, and we know that the value is about $5.2, $5.3 billion right now. So if you just do the math, you can come up with what the rate's going to be as a ballpark, even without their input. Right now, it's 57.
You can do it, but I'm not going to swear to it.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, we've done it. We've done it here many times.
and it's a little scary.
It doesn't
So the rate
sound
will
as
drop.
if
The rate will,
we're...
if nothing else changed, we had the same budget, the rate will drop by that
Just so that we
amount.
can move on. It doesn't appear that this is going to be a question that's going to go on the ballot this year, Mayor.
Well, let's see if we have a better take on it in July.
It's close, yeah.
Right, if we have a better
Let's say
take on it in
move
July, we can
Yeah.
discuss
Can we
it
just
then.
maybe have an open dialogue through you with the assessor about what's the earliest that they might be comfortable in giving us some sense of what additional funds are available?
And Mayor, is this open
That's
space we're talking about or farmland preservation?
This is, we can play this out to the end.
It's the way that we crafted the last tax was for both. The original open space preservation fund was not for both. The one that we updated to the additional penny was for open
For both.
space or farmland, and it would be my recommendation that we do
Recreation.
the same thing again, that it be recreation, that it be open space acquisition for passive and recreational use, and farmland preservation.
All right,
but
but
to
we could
Tom's
make it
point-
either way, correct?
Yeah.
But to Tom's point, his first
Yes.
point, if the tax rate right now is 42, 43%, whatever it is, and drops down to like 24 cents per hundred, and we leave the open space at 2 cents. It actually just almost doubled in,
right.
in aggregate, the amount of dollars that comes
That's exactly
in.
correct.
So,
Yeah, I mean, Tom was...
so we might want to wait a year just to see what the net effect is.
I'll just say,
Next.
I think you want to be in a position where you can
Justify.
do a mailing, informative literature explaining exactly what's being paid, what the impact would be, in order to have a referendum. And I don't think you're in a position to do that now, not knowing what everyone's going to be paying.
All right, so let's revisit it in a few months. Let's see if there's any more information. Maybe we can put it in for a tickler for a couple of months from now, and we may be in the same basis, and we move on. The next issue is also one I asked to be put on. I feel very strongly about this one, the road allocation paving plan. As Mr. Chernetsky can attest, 1 out of every 2 emails I get about 100 to 150 a week, are related to roads. And I can only say that if I'm misspeaking, Mr. Chernetsky, please correct me.
No, it's frustrating.
And it is from everything from I've lived on the same street for 25 years and it's never been paved. I've lived in the same development and they've never come back and poured the asphalt from the time that it was approved, and I'm here since 1970, to I'm in Candlewood and it's never been touched since the day I moved in, to roads are crumbling, to redwood. I mean, we've suffered from many, many years of neglect. And I'm not being political about it. It's irrelevant who our predecessors were. It is absolutely irrelevant. We are in a very serious situation with roads. We will spend in excess of $2.5 million in the largest road improvement plan I'm told the town has ever done in one shot, and it gets us 16 miles, with 14 miles, and we have about 150 to 160 miles of road that the town has to maintain, which is different than the county. And those are estimates. Maybe it is more. Maybe it's 180 miles of road. But whatever it is, at this rate, we'll have paved all the roads by 2070. And that's just not, in my judgment, that's not acceptable. So I continue to hear loud and clear from the people who live in the township, they want the roads fixed now. People are paying a very significant amount in taxes, and they want the roads paved. They want them fixed. And I think we have to step up a way to do this. It is a very considerable expense. It is not it certainly is not like buying open space where the sentiment is clear in terms of the investment of doing that. I happen to think fixing and maintaining the roads is an investment. It helps someone preserve their property value. It helps from a safety perspective, et cetera, et cetera. But to do this, what I'm recommending is that we calculate over a 2 or 3 year period, what would it take to get all the roads up to grade? Over a 2 to 3 year period, using the economies of scale, acquiring the raw materials in a much greater scale, and the labor expenses, and let's come up with a price tag, and let's let the people decide if it's a price that they want to spend, and that way, people can be told, if it's practical, that within 3 years, all the roads get fixed. Some need to be paved, some need to be sealed, some need to be completely blown up and rebuilt, all over again, quite frankly. I mean, there are roads in Ramtown that I have walked on that are an embarrassment. They're absolutely, it's terrible.
Question
and I
for
think
you.
let me just finish this last thought. By coming up with a number, we can say to people, if we want to go back and touch every road over the next 3 years, this is what it costs. Vote yes or no. And the alternative is we will continue, at least as long as we're up here, I think we're all committed to doing it, to setting aside $1 million, whatever the number is, every year to maintain our maintenance plan. And we have a plan that inventories every road, so we know on a worst scenario basis to a best scenario basis that factors in the number of trips and traffic patterns most heavily used. We know the order in which the roads need to be fixed. But at the rate we're going now, it's going to take 15, 20 years to get there. And I don't want to be the person, because I don't think it's the right thing to do, to tell the person who lives in Candlewood that because your road is not heavily traveled and it hasn't been paved in 30 years, you're going to have to wait another 10 before it gets touched. So I'd like us to calculate the expenses on a broader scale, using the economies of scale, large acquisition, big project, to determine if it's something that our customers, the shareholders of this business, would like us to do.
First of all, a project that how long, what a timeline? I mean, what are you talking? You're not talking a year, you're talking a few years to accomplish that, number one.
Well, it depends who you hire.
Right.
Yeah, Halliburton.
Or you're going to hire several you're going to have several companies come in to do bidding on it. That's number one. Number two
gotta
is,
get there.
what is the cost factor going to involve? Can we use our maintenance program bill that told us the conditions of our roads from good, bad, and no road for a cost factor, so we have kind of an idea? Or are we going to have to go out and spend a few $1,000s to come up with a number?
Well, I mean, Bill may be able to answer that further, but we've got the assessment of
Correct.
every single road and what needs to be done, what needs to be sealed, what needs to be paved, what needs
Right.
to be
Well, that's what I'm
milled.
asking.
I mean, I think that's not stale work.
There are some co-ops, cooperative pricing councils, that actually go out and, for the agglomeration of communities that belong to the co-op, go out and get a price per linear foot for milling and repaving. So I can call those co-ops and just see what price they received as a estimate.
Do we know if there are any other communities in our area right now that are going through the same process as we are on road maintenance, where we can do some kind of joint services for, just like you said, because of the size of the job?
I think it's certainly worthwhile to see if we can have a conversation with Lakewood or with Brick and put together a huge purchasing coalition, sort of a separate co-op entity that maybe is a regional business that gets established to fulfill this function in a number of municipalities. I mean, I've talked to my contemporaries in other municipalities. They're facing the same issue, but no one, I think, is facing the issue to where we are just because of the sheer size of the town.
Yes.
I mean, there isn't another town that is as big as we are that has the issue. That's the big problem that we've got. And I talked to a councilman in Tinton Falls, and they can pave every road in their entire town with what we spent on the 16 miles of road that we're doing right now. I mean, the entire town they could repave in one shot. So I don't know that there's many other places that have the same problem we do.
Something of this magnitude would have to be put on for referendum.
Absolutely.
Because, like as Mr. Walsh has pointed out, and we have discussed over and over, the tax burden right here to the taxpayers is beyond what they can bear.
I do not disagree. That's why I've said all along, it has to be a question for the people in the community. Do they want immediate road improvement? And if they do, this is what it costs. This is a business decision for people. And yet I'm staring at 2 or 3 letters here right now from people who are in desperate need of their roads being maintained.
So
It's worth asking, because in simple terms, in 1992, our tax rate was basically the same thing it is now, as a percent amount. It was like 42, 43 cents back then. It's now 2006. I'd venture to say that the local district in the schools was not whatever it is right now, at $2 and something. It might have been, 50 cents. So that's actually quadruple while we stayed the same as a rate. So where I brought this up before, we're at 11 cents on the dollar. The schools are 72 cents on the dollar. And yet, both budgets passed. So the people saw the need to have the schools maintained. Maybe they will see the need that we need to fix our roads, and they're sick of it. So it doesn't hurt to ask.
They'll tell you what their top priority is.
Well, number 2 is
That's right.
roads.
They're going to tell you.
That's
Put it on
exactly right.
referendum. They're either going to say, fix my roads or stabilize my taxes.
Number 2
Well,
is roads.
but I think that if we explain it to the residents the right way, and we say there are property value issues, there are safety issues. I get concerns from residents say their kids can't ride their bicycles in their neighborhoods because the potholes are so dangerous. I got people who write to me or call and say the potholes are so big their cars bottom out. They can't get across their roadways. The roads are cracked, and it creates drainage and runoff issues. This is the case on the corner of Easy Street and Newton's Corner Road. I mean, the list that I have on road catastrophes is growing all the time, and we cannot, in fairness, keep up with the problem and be candid with people and say, yes, we'll send a crew out to fix the road, because we don't have the money to do it.
We don't have the equipment in-house. These are things that we do, we contract for. So it is very discouraging when you can't respond to a resident who has a legitimate gripe.
So then the question becomes, how long? How do we ask this question? Do we say, do you want to fix all the roads in 3 years, 5 years, and here's the cost? If you do it in 3 years, the cost. If you do it in 5, that's what we should be. I guess we're going to ask the question. So what question do we ask?
So you're looking for a draft language, just to start talking about, of a non-binding referendum asking the residents whether they would support a tax increase of so much to fund a bond that would pay for the redoing of the roads.
Yes.
Okay.
In totality, and you have to have
And I think what we need to get from the management team is, if we did every road based on the road report that we've got from Mazer Consulting, and we said we want to do the whole thing tomorrow, taking into consideration the acquisition of materials on a much greater quantity, the economies of scale, et cetera, what would it cost? And if we did it in 2 years, what would it cost? And if we did it in 3 years, what would it cost? And then we have to decide as a council what's the best, most reasonable one to present to the community. And maybe we say, over a 3-year period, every road gets done, and we publish what that list looks like, and it costs this amount of money, and then people will decide if the answer is yes or no.
There are one or two considerations that you need to be aware of. First off, we're going to have to go out to bid. It's going to be prevailing wage. So labor is going to be labor.
Yep.
The blacktop, material-wise, you're going to pay.
Going up,
You're going to pay for
up.
tonnage. Okay, so whether you buy 1,000 tons or 50,000 tons, I don't think you're going to get a discount price-wise.
Really?
So co-op don't count.
Probably
Tom was
not.
talking about don't count.
Okay. It all depends on what happens with the commodity market and if you're going to get a price increase or a spike, that type of thing. Like I said, labor's labor. The material price may not be a factor. Then really all you have to determine is really the condition of the roads. I mean, to just put 2 inches of blacktop down, that's one thing, but you might have drainage concerns, curbing, the trees, down to the base repairs and
Milling.
stormwater upgrades for the new stormwater regs. And quite frankly, the report as it now exists does not consider the 5 to 7 year window of newer roads. They would have to be included in the inventory. Granted, they might not need as much attention as the 150 miles of old degraded roads, but nonetheless, there's a lot that still has to be done in order to make that assessment.
Well, let me ask, not to work the issue here, does it make sense if we charge you as a management team, I think you know the gist of what we would like to accomplish, to go back and figure out what's the best way to come back to us with, here's what it is we think you're looking for, it would cost this much, it may take this long, and then we decide what to do next? I mean, do you have enough direction in terms of what we want to accomplish?
I do. Mayor, I just have to say and I know we're far from executing on contracts for anything like this, but the one thing that stands out in my mind is not only the condition of the roads, but maybe the fourth or fifth item on the list is speeding. And
that's four.
I truly believe that speeding can be controlled by design of roads. So, if we were going to make such a huge investment, there are communities and there are neighborhoods where redesigns ought to be taken into account in order to address that second problem as well. So I don't want to complicate a straightforward question, but I think
to consider though.
But
It's something to consider.
But I think some planning would need to come into effect as well. Some additional planning beyond what we've done.
We'll come back to us on that too, Tom.
I'll do that.
To add to that for a second, I've gotten a number of inquiries from our residents about they've driven through other municipalities where the roads have speed humps built right in them. It's a part right of the curvature of the road, and there's a sign that says bump. And Eatontown, I mean, there are good, some towns have done it right, some have done it wrong because it causes other issues. But I would hope that if we were going to do this, that we would look at some of those things in the right areas.
There's a, I don't want to point to any particular subdivision, but there's one off of Aldrich Road where I swear could be designed for a highway in terms of its width, and it serves perhaps a dozen homes. So I think we need to look at those sort of things, turning radiuses, tree canopies, all those things that are in a federal highway study that indicate slows traffic down.
All right, so how long before you guys can get back to us with a high level, again, if we're running against the clock, that we would need to have a referendum question ready to the clerk by September? If we sort of turn the clock back a little bit, we are at a bit of a time crunch. Why don't you get back to us the next council meeting and give us a timeline?
Well, let us staff this.
Okay.
Give it some thought.
All right. The next is 10-6, which we've already done. There's no correspondence or petitions. So next is a hearing of citizens. I have the list.
I'll be right back.
First person is Mrs. Pauline Smith. Come on up, Mrs. Smith. Welcome.
No executive session, sir.
Not tonight. I got to be in New York City at 7:30 tomorrow morning.
No, none of you get up as early as me.
I got to be up at 4:30 tomorrow.
I'm up there at 4 every day.
You're gonna leave too, huh? No. No. Please, no.
Come on, Ms. Go ahead, Mrs. Smith. Come on up. Welcome.
I'm just teasing. I always do that when somebody says that. No, you can't go.
Please give us your name and address, as always, for the record. Nice to see you.
Pauline Smith, for my whole adult life, and it used to be longer, it used to be RD2 Vanderveer Road. It's now 54 Vanderveer Road, but I've spent my whole adult life, 43 years there. I've seen many, many changes. So many things to talk about tonight that I know you're going to call time. But I have to comment on a lot of things. And I don't quite know where to start. Pete left.
I
want
think
him
he,
to
like
hear.
Mr. Walsh, needed to go to the bathroom.
I know.
We've been up here for a while.
And I understand that. I expected you to take a break. I'll go back to that when Pete comes back because I want to address him about that that open space subject. Mr. DeBella, you pride yourself, obviously, I've observed, on being respectful. And I don't think you're very respectful when you make comments about prior administrations and what they did or didn't do with the roads. You weren't here. You don't know. I was, and a lot of other people were, and before me. And believe me, just about every administration tried very hard, was cognizant of the problem. So please stop doing that. It wasn't past administration's failures. It was life circumstances, the same things that you face, the largeness of the municipality, the miles of roads, the environmental issues, the lack of properly built infrastructure, just plain asphalt on top of dirt roads without any base does not lead to longevity when it comes to the life of a road. All the building, all the things that you, especially Pete, think are great for the township, bring it in. More traffic. Well, the more traffic you have, the more wear and tear on the roads, the more cost to the taxpayers. When you look at ratables, and maybe you've changed, but I used to go to those meetings, and everybody thought such and such was a good idea. But I never saw anybody sit down with a formula that said this particular business is a rateable because it will bring in more than the services required. I hope you do that now. You didn't in the first couple of years as a committee. And to me, that's just common sense. And if I didn't have that common sense, I wouldn't be able to pay the taxes all these years. And that's going to be a real problem. Another thing that I want to address, and I wanted Pete to be here because he always talks about building things. And yes, Juan, you were exactly right about open space. But once you build on it, it's not open space anymore. And a lot of us out here are willing to sacrifice to buy open space to preserve it for the future, but not for you to build on it. I don't care if it's a rec center, a school, or what. We need to be able to breathe the air and drink the water before we need any of that. And the best thing you can do for taxes is stop irresponsible spending. And by that, I mean unnecessary spending. You take care of the roads, you take care of the buildings, you take care of necessities before you bond for millions of dollars to build ball fields or buildings that will be leased by leagues. Bonding for those things is very irresponsible. If you can afford it, I'm all for it. But we can't afford it now. We, the taxpayers, cannot afford it. And I don't think any of you will argue with me. Now, on a positive note, and I'll have a lot more to say about a lot of other things later, but it's getting late and a lot of people want to speak. I want to make a couple of comments about the hotel ordinance, but first I want to say I was very glad to see Tom's presentation. It's something that I've wanted for a long time, and on the planning board, but I find on the planning board, when I am strict, or was, because I'm no longer on the planning board, probably one of the reasons, because I'm strict at adherence to requirements, regulations, ordinances, when I don't want to give waivers or variances because it lessens the quality of the, we'll call it product along Route 9, I'm told that I'm against these things, and I wasn't. It's just that I've heard for a long, long time and listened when I was on council and on different committees and on the planning board to the people who live adjacent, near, have to travel Route 9. And I know Cindy agrees with me because we've had this back and forth over the dais over the years about the quality of what building along Route 9 and requirements and to set standards. So I'm so glad to see that, and I hope you go forward with it, and I'll help if I can.
Couldn't cross
He snuck out.
I was only teasing him. I wouldn't hold anybody up from going to the bathroom. As far as the hotel ordinance, I don't care where it is, it's going to impact people. I'm glad to see that you listened, so I'm not yelling at you all the time, that you listened and that you took another look and research and made a much better ordinance. I would like to see less than 4 stories, and as far as the requirement, I'd like to see them, for height, I'd like to see the ordinance strictly written so that people can't squeeze out of it. In other words, 4 stories, or, not or, but and, to make sure that all the setback requirements are held to so that they can't go one way or the other. I have seen a lot of squirming out of ordinances over the years. The hotel, and I was talking about them in conjunction because I think they go together even though they're separate ordinances. We need to have a larger buffer. A hotel is a big impact on residents. The noise, the traffic, the smells. Think about when you go on vacation. Most hotels aren't near anything, and unless they're in built cities. I'm thinking of things that are similar to Howell Township. And also with the hotel, I've lost my track of it. Well, there's one more thing. And I didn't want to wait till public hearing, but it concerns the people and the residents and the impact on them. Sorry.
It's okay.
No, I'm sure you're not sorry.
Why wouldn't I be sorry?
Because I'll stop talking because I've lost my train of thought.
Mrs. Smith, you know we always welcome your comments.
Oh, you don't pay attention to them, though, do you?
I don't know why you would say that. We sit at every meeting and listen to everything that you talk about.
Well, when you, in the future, no longer make comments about prior administrations because you don't necessarily know, you weren't here.
Well, the only
that
thing
somebody was
the only thing I'll
failing.
say, and I'm certain that everyone will recall, when I opened up, I said, regardless of what any of our predecessors did or didn't do, it's irrelevant. And I think I opened up by making that comment when we started the dialogue around roads. The fact is, I don't know who was here 30 years ago. I won't tell you how old I was 30 years ago, but I wasn't old enough to be in a decision-making capacity to know what did or didn't happen. But it is a fact that there are people that live in Candlewood who have been there for 30 years, who lived in the same home and have said, my road has never been paved. So it's irrelevant. This is not about passing blame, and that's why I opened up with, it's irrelevant who was here, who did or didn't do it. We're dealing with it now. And that's the issue.
And after you go, it will, no matter what good a job you do, it will continue to be a big problem because
That's right.
there's so many roads and so much traffic. It's just common sense.
I just think the difference that we're trying to make is a public acknowledgement that this is a real problem.
It is
and
a real
that we need
problem.
to determine as a community the best way to fix it, and we need to make some business decisions about what makes most sense. And the people are ultimately going to have an opportunity to decide.
And
So-
my point is very strongly that the only way to do it is to spend on necessities only. The last time that I spoke, I said something about tightening belts, and I said hour because I'm willing to be part of it always. I don't expect, and I know darn well that you, the governing body, whoever sits up there, doesn't do it for us. We all have to do it. But we all have to tighten our belts, and that means not to spend money unless it's absolutely necessary. If it doesn't need to support, if it doesn't put the roof on your head, the food in your mouth, and pay your electric bill, you shouldn't be spending it. And if people require recreation other than very basics, then they should pay extra. I'm tired of paying for somebody else's recreation and my own, which I do.
Okay. Thank
And
you,
I
Mrs.
think
Smith.
everybody should do the same thing. It should, if you want to provide a program,
Thank you.
pay for whoever uses it. It
All right.
should be user-funded. And all those bonds should be paid for by the users, not by the people that are going to lose their houses over it. Because the way we're going, the working-class people in Howell will no longer be able to stay, and that's most of us. You have to remember us. I know Juan works very hard.
What about me?
I guess he's the only one, right?
What am I-
Okay, gee. All right, thank you. Mrs. Dixell, welcome. Come on up, Mrs. Dixell.
Yeah, what am I, chopped liver, Pauline?
Yeah.
Next.
Did she? 15 minutes she spoke.
In the pen.
Well, you have to do a better
Little
job.
bit of money.
Remember, all of us work.
Mr. Davis, would you keep the clock for me again, please? I need you to give me a 5, okay? Mrs. Dixell, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Barbara Dixell, Howell Township, The Villages.
Hi, Mrs. Dixell.
Hi. Number of things. I did read the Asbury Park Press article on the hotel today. Oh, well. Don't let them dictate to us, and don't tell them if we don't give them what they want, let them walk. Who cares?
As
Who
you know, we've
cares?
covered that, so we're
I'm
in
just
good-
saying, who
We're in
cares?
good shape. Good, okay.
Okay, the C1, the court upheld the 300-foot, the court upheld the 300-foot
Yes.
buffers. Now, how does that affect us now with everything that we're building, hotels and whatever, and stuff up at the Pinnacle and whatever?
We have to comply. We will continue to have to comply. So it doesn't really impact us at all.
Okay, but didn't we kind of adjust buffers or whatever, or riparian buffers or?
The C1 is a state law. We have to be compliant with that. There's no,
But-
there is no adjusting that.
Okay, but I thought we were changing or
We
adjusting
spoke
the
about it, I
buffers.
believe, in December.
But that wasn't to impact
Okay.
Here's what we did. The township has additional buffer restrictions that go above and beyond C1 designations. So there was discussion around not applying the same C1 designations to all bodies of water. We apply the C1 designations now to more than just C1 stream corridors. So that was the discussion.
Okay.
But as it relates to the court, to answer your question specifically, doesn't change anything.
Okay.
That's a state law.
It was
It's on the
top-
books.
It was top of the bank versus center of river. too.
Correct.
It was a whole
Okay.
bunch of.
What else, Mrs. Dixon?
Okay, on the Harms Pinnacle, there won't be any homes on that ever, will there? When
Won't be
you,
any.
homes?
Not if we
on
get
when-
it.
Not if, well, no, I mean, not as far as we're concerned.
Okay. Okay, regarding Hovnanian, the fence, the village's fence, I was out there today, I walked the perimeter. I took another whole roll of film, this time I took panoramic pictures. I'll let you look at them, I'm gonna take them back. There's not a heck of a lot of anything of a 50-foot buffer that they planted on the other side. It's up, anything beyond our stuff, which is mostly on our, because I couldn't go on their side and take pictures, but there's not a hell of a lot there. So I'll just let you look at all the stuff. But, is there anything we can do to get a meeting with Hovnanian? I know we're still bitching and moaning about, U.S. Homes. I mean, they're still bitching and moaning about the house and the barn and
You
stuff.
mean Leonard?
Yeah. Can we get a meeting with these people about this?
About the barn?
No, about this village's fence along the perimeter of the villages.
I thought that we said that we were going to have a meeting arranged and that you would walk the property. What's the latest, Mr. Nunziato, briefly?
Briefly, they had expressed to us rather definitively that they were interested first and foremost in complying with us, working with us to get the outbuildings down. And when that process was completed, they would take the next step, which would be to entertain possibly a meeting on these additional issues.
All right, so it sounds like we have it in for a tickler so that once the barn issue is resolved, and now we know that it's been resolved, they just have to schedule a date to demolish them. We'll have a follow-up meeting on this other issue. Is that fair?
Okay, and I want to make it on the record also that Bill's letter to U.S. Homes that said we would be interested in post and rail is not what we said the night we hung the maps. The night we hung the maps, we said PVC fence or chain
Bless
link
you.
and green slats.
Okay.
So how Bill's letter got to say post and rail, I don't know, but we got post and rail in the villages now, and you can hop over it.
I didn't hear any discussion on specifics. I don't recall any discussion on specifics, Barbara.
We said that the night we hung the maps. And we requested that because I had a meeting with Senator Singer, and I came back and told you guys exactly what Senator Singer said. He said, bulldoze the houses, they're over the buffer. And then he said, you guys should be entitled to a fence now that they violated the buffers, and it should be chain link and green slats.
But didn't we find out that they did not violate the buffers and that they
No,
were
they're
both?
2 to 5 feet, there's 7 houses, they're exactly 2 to 5 feet infringement into the buffer.
No, that's absolutely incorrect. But
Okay.
but your original concern, which was the fence, you had reminded me of
Okay.
that.
Well, how
several
come I
months
have
ago.
county maps that the county outlined for me that said they're 2 to 5 feet in the buffer?
Let me finish one at a time, okay? As far as your concern of which type of fence, I've acknowledged that, yes, you had said one thing, I had said something else, but again, when we get to that point, we will discuss it then.
Okay.
So let's not go there.
Okay.
As far as the buffer, there are no encroachments into the buffers. There is I don't know if you want to call it a discrepancy, but there's a confusing part of that plan where the setback lines and the buffers are not one and the same, and that's where the confusion comes in. They're absolutely not violating any of the buffers, but some of the rear yard setback is actually in the buffer, which is
Right.
why
Rear
it
yard
looks
setbacks.
confusing.
Okay.
It's just a rear yard setback. It's a dotted line on a plan. Doesn't mean there's anything.
All right, so-
Isn't that encroachment into the buffer? I mean, the county actually outlined it for me. I went to see the county engineer, and the guy sat there and outlined it
Mr.
for me.
Nunziato, this is in your domain. Is this or is this not encroaching the buffer? Is that the time?
That's time.
All right. Is this or is it not encroaching the buffer?
There are no physical structures of any sort in the buffer.
Okay. All right. So the takeaways are, we're going to schedule this follow-up meeting with Lennar once the barns have been demolished. we are addressing the fence issue, and to address Mrs. Dixell's concern, in your professional opinion, it's not encroaching the buffer.
That is correct.
Okay.
One last question.
Go ahead, Mrs. Dixell, one last one.
People have mentioned to me that you guys are entertaining a bid to redesign or refix, or God knows what, the police station and the courthouse?
Now, let me give you the...
There was something in the newspaper that you guys were asking for a bid for May 1st?
We'll give you a brief explanation, and then we're going to get to the next speaker. We received a recommendation from the chief of police and from our municipal judge that there are certain safety issues as it relates to the current setup of the interior of the courthouse. They have asked us to make some modifications to that design from a safety perspective. So as a function of that, all of that work has to go out to public low bid for the alterations to be implemented, but those are changes being done not for cosmetic purposes, but for safety purposes in the day-to-day operation of the court. Okay?
Yeah, I just don't want to see us spending a lot of money, more money than we've already spent. That's what, like,
No, and we got public testimony from the judge himself, who said that these changes are absolutely imminent from a safety perspective.
Our salaries and our social securities are not going up. I mean,
Don't disagree with you.
taxes are going to go up, and we're going to be hurting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mrs. Dixell.
Mayor, if I can just clarify two things.
Sure, please,
First,
Mr. Janetzky.
before the barns come down, there is an intermediate step of the planning board having to amend.
Correct. Can we just
something.
find out? I don't know. I haven't seen that on a planning board agenda yet, but
I'll provide counsel with the memo, since I know you get
Terrific.
calls about
Okay.
it. And also, just to make, this was part of the capital budget from
That's right.
2005.
okay. All right, Mr. Jack Branu. Is it Brandon? I'm sorry. It looked like a different spelling at the end. Welcome, Mr.
Brandon.
Brandon. Good to see you again.
First, I want to make a comment about the ordinance on the hotel. I want to thank you. You took a lot of suggestions and put it into the ordinance. I just want some clarification on a couple things, that's
Sure.
all. Where it says minimum lot area, it was 5 acres, and I guess it's going to be changed to 7?
7.
Is that buildable acres or total acreage?
Typically, zoning ordinances read total acreage.
So if somebody comes up with a lot that has 3 acres of swampland and 4 acres of buildable, it can still go on that.
Yes.
Can you word that as buildable acres? Or usable acres?
I haven't seen an ordinance that calls for that. I don't know if the attorneys ever.
Well, I'm just saying, because you can get a parcel of land that's 25 acres, that 12 are buildable, and the rest is swampland. I mean, you have to be careful on the wording.
Mr. Gannon, just to answer.
Buildable is a very difficult definition. You know, you can have an uplands, but it might be in a buffer area, so that's not buildable.
I understand
So, but
that. I'm just saying, is there any way you can define it a little bit more?
What's the point? We went from 3 to 5 to 7. What's the point?
The point is you can have 1 acre buildable out of 7 and put a hotel on it. That's the point.
The reason to go to 3 to 5 to 7 was to give
Okay.
more space for the hotel to be and not encroach on, residences and stuff.
And-
So if it
and
went from
the-
3 to 5 to 7, and now you're still picking on whether it's 7. What's the point? At some point, enough.
Well,
What's the point?
the point is you need a definition.
All right, Mr. Gannon, if I may, Mr. Brennan, you've obviously represented planning boards and zoning boards and seen these kinds of issues. In your judgment, can something be set up so that it is buildable
Or
acres?
usable, something,
and,
terminology.
Okay.
I'm sorry I don't agree with you, Mr. Tabasco. At least give me the courtesy of speaking, please.
You have the floor.
All right,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Gannon, go ahead, sir. What's your judgment in response to Mr. Brannon's question?
Well, generally speaking, you have all the other parameters and the issues with regard to setbacks and, square footage, et cetera, that will deal with the building.
Okay.
So
So there are built into the.
Yeah, I mean, we can go through it to see how you walk it through. But there is, I've seen other towns that deal with buildable area, but they generally hang their hat on environmental constraints.
Fine.
And then there was Manalapan tried to do that, and they got knocked out a couple of years ago. But there's ways of doing it if you think if the governing body thinks it's necessary, the planner, but.
All right. I mean, but there's
safety catches built in,
Yes,
the
I mean-
offsets and...
Right,
Okay.
setbacks, et
That's
cetera,
fine.
et
Does that
cetera.
satisfy your concern, Mr. Brennan?
That's my
There's
first...
a flow area ratio, there's all those other regulations.
Okay.
And then it says the maximum improvement coverage is 70%. If you increase the acreage to 7 acres, do you want to reduce that ratio to 60% then? I'm asking. It's
Sure,
a
no,
question.
it's a good question. I mean, I think,
Well, that was a discussion we had when you went to 7 acres,
Right.
and, you know, you could build a bigger building, but then we're dealing with 125,000, so we're addressing that.
Okay, that's all. I was-
These are all
Those
fair
are
questions.
issues.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the last thing is more of a statement than a question.
Sure.
There seems to be a lot of heated discussion about bonding issues for property and road repairs. I think the council and mayor has to find a balance somewhere in there,
Yep.
all right, between the two. People, you can't keep floating bond issues out there for road repair when people may not be able to pay their taxes now. And you sort of have to, like I said, find that balance somewhere in
Yeah,
between.
you're right.
Maybe not bond $23 million to buy parcels of land. Maybe, okay, we'll buy, I know it's a hard thing not to buy at this point, but maybe take a portion of that money that's not going to be used, or somehow balance it out and spend more money on road repair, because that seems to be a very hot topic in the town as well right now. That's all.
no, your comments are helpful. We appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Nice to see you. Thanks, Mr. Brennan. Mr. Howell, welcome, sir. I understand that there was not only one Eagle Scout in the room tonight, that there may have been a second. Could that have been you, Scout Howell?
Say again, man?
I understand that we didn't only have one Eagle Scout in the room tonight, that you may also be an Eagle Scout, is that right?
That's absolutely correct, and I thank you for all of the nice comments.
Trustworthy,
You,
loyal,
uh,
helpful,
you
friendly,
put
courteous,
out there
kind, obedient, cheerful,
concerning
thrifty,
Eagle
brave, clean, and reverent.
What's that?
I said trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent.
Yeah.
I remember it to this day. I didn't get as far as you did. What can we do for you, Mr. Howell?
Well, a couple of things with the hotel ordinance, and the applicant having to go for the DOT approvals. Will the applicant still have the ability to request a submission waiver so that he doesn't have to have that to be deemed complete?
Again, I think we need to turn over to council or manager to respond. I don't know the
Each
answer.
planning board, and I'm not intimately familiar with our planning board, how they operate. Sometimes they'll make that as a condition of the approval. Other times they'll say, get it first and come back. So it's, you know, it's a good question, and it's probably something that if we made that a priority in the ordinance in terms of, you know, this is, as opposed to a design waiver, it's like a variance, then it may have to wait the DOT, or at least some kind of, you know, if I'm advising the planning board, they should have some type of idea. And I think the applicant would probably want to have a pretty good idea before they spent all the money going up through the plans as whether the DOT is going to give them the access.
Right, but I think it's a safeguard to make them have it in their hand. You know, that way they don't
Yeah, I
come
mean,
back.
that's probably, you know, the best way to go. Of course, you know, applicants, as Ms. Smith said, sometimes can say, well, you know, we're going this far, and you should at least hear it, and if they want to, you probably could preface it, say any permits would be subject to the DOT approval, but, or anything, soil disturbance, but that's up to the planning board.
Although, Mr. Howell, if I can just quick comment, I have, this is not the first time I sat on the planning board. In the past, you will find an applicant that will come in and ask for a submission waiver, and they will give it to him, but it has to be done for final approval. It may not be done at that very point, at the beginning of the checklist.
Right.
But, which is foolish on their part, oftentimes, because they go through the expenditure of the applicant and find out that in the end, they didn't get DOT approval.
Well, if I may interject, though, in some cases, they do that to see what they would be permitted on the local level prior to
Right.
seeing if it's even worth going to the DOT.
Right.
But nonetheless, if they do get their board approval, when my office does all the outside agencies, we will not issue them any building permit.
Nothing.
In some cases, not even do the pre-con unless some of those approvals are in place, because we don't want them doing site work if they don't have their DOT approvals in place.
Okay. Is, with what Mr. Walsh had brought up earlier this evening with the road striping being done on roads that we have on that list, I know Miller Road's on that list. It was painted end to end. yellow with the white lines on both sides.
We
I
have to
think
check.
Arnold Boulevard as well was
We have to
painted.
check all of them, because it really doesn't make any sense to be,
Yeah, I was on Arnold, and that's why I thought it was on the list.
yeah, paint the roads and
Didn't
then
get to Miller.
in 2 months we're going to pave them and paint them again. We'll put a stop to that if we can get on top of that right away. Is that right? Okay.
All right, and the last thing, about a year ago, Mr. Tabasco had brought up having the requirement on construction sites for the legal working hours posted.
Absolutely.
And the council was going to look into it. And the reason I bring it up is my daughter had a softball tournament that she was supposed to go to on Sunday, where we were having to leave Howell Township at 5 o'clock in the morning. I got up. The tournament was canceled because of the weather. And I went past a site that's under construction because I wound up going to Wawa at 5:30 in the morning on a Sunday, and this guy's pounding nails. And it's a constant problem. We don't have code enforcement on the weekends here. They're, you know, the Board of Health ordinance here says you can work on commercial construction allowed to be performed on Saturdays from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and not again until Monday morning. Nothing on Sundays.
But Mr. Howell, I know firsthand, and Mr. Davis can vouch for that. I personally have called Mr. Davis and the police department on a Sunday if there was a construction site being operated on a Sunday. You can call the police department.
It is a police ordinance, by the way.
And they will come out.
It's a Board of Health ordinance. Now, Bruce gave me the copy of the ordinance, and it's a Board of Health ordinance.
Well, generally speaking, though, our police can,
About 2 years ago in school,
can enforce it also.
Police can enforce it.
It's
You know, and the other site that I saw them working on was the church on Oakland Road on Sunday morning at 5:30.
They're getting ready for mass.
No, not yet. They're not open yet.
They're getting the bread and wine right now.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Howell. Mrs. Weitengruber, welcome. Come on up.
Good evening. Let me make some of these things very quick. First of all, there was a reference.
Say your name and address.
Suzanne Weitengruber, 25 Princeton Drive.
There you go. Thanks.
I heard reference, and perhaps Mr. Zarnicki misspoke, or I heard him wrong, but there was never a 6-story height limitation, at least through 92. And if I have to go out and drag up my old land use book, I'm sure I probably have it still hanging around. It was the height limit I can at least speak for through 92 was 35 feet. What happened to it after then, perhaps when it was recodified or sometime later, I don't know. All of the roads in Candlewood and Salem Hill and the little portion of what is referred to Pinewood, that's Pinewood Road, Graymore, Laurel Court, were all paved in the summer of '79. I distinctly remember because my child was 2 years old, and we had to park our cars over Newberry Road, Newberry School, and it was a 3-block walk with my little 2-year-old to get to our car. So they were paved more than...
Good, okay.
26 years ago, something like that. There have been intermittent pavings since then in certain roads. And in fact, I want you to know that in 1990, with one of the road contractors, we moved against the vendor's bond. I won't mention the contractor because they're still around, but we did pave a significant number of roads, and we moved against their bonds when they did not perform the way they should. The open space tax, I want to commend you, Mr. Zarnicki, because that is something I've been talking to people about, and it comes up quite often. There are a lot of homes that are at far less than the 57% market ratio. Probably the whole mid-area of town, Glenarden, Candlewood, that area is probably closer to about 35-40%. And we will probably see our assessments go up appropriately to that. So that means that 2 cents really could become as much as 6 cents, not only for the municipality, 6 cents for the county also. So any change you see in the rate may well be offset by what that increase is in. I do think if you want to have successful open space, you absolutely need to hold on to it for a year until everybody understands where they are at the revow. The big box, I love the design standards. I think the design standards are wonderful. I'm not sure limiting the size by 125 square foot is appropriate. I would love not to have to travel to Bricktown or to Ocean Township or to Freehold to go to a Costco or a Sam's. And the new Sam's really is very, very nice. And Freehold held their feet to the fire, which is what needs to be done here in terms of design and setbacks, particularly setbacks. What does that do to our existing stores, such as Lowe's, Home Depot? I believe Kohl's is over 125,000 square feet.
Grandfathered in. It would apply prospectively.
Well, does it, or do you now become non-conforming if you want to make a change? Yeah, actually, I believe you become non-conforming.
Well, it's not a zoning issue. It's a development standard. So it is grandfathered, but as you say, if you come in for any expansion,
you're non-conforming.
But I don't think conformances apply to. Apply to these kind of standards.
You can address it.
I'm not
either
talking
manner.
about the design standards. I'm talking about we have a property that's 135,000 square feet, a Lowe's, for instance, a Home Depot. Now they want to do something, and maybe it's even an interior something, or they want to expand another 2,000 feet. Maybe they want to expand their garden center, because their garden centers, really now that we don't have any freestanding ones around, are really where most people go. If they want to expand even 3,000 square feet, they've got to come in for a variance. They are non-conforming. I think before, I see where you're trying to go, but I think before you start doing those things, you're better off with those facade and design and lighting standards than limiting, because you could have a magnificent 175,000 square foot building that is properly designed. And for the record, when the Walmart came in, the chief supporter was the Chamber of Commerce. And one of the chief supporters was Gene Young, who's still doing fine, even though those stores have added appliances. So I think you might be surprised that the Chamber of Commerce isn't crying about people going out of business. The ones that have gone out of business in town are big stores, big retail lines. The RX place went out of business, and some of the clothing stores, Fashion Bug, went out of business, but then they relocated, thank God. So, I mean, the ones that have been going out of business are not small stores. So I'm really not sure. I think you need to think about that before you go further. And if you are going to do this, then if you're going to put a limit, I think you should take a look at what your biggest big box is, whether it's Lowe's or Home Depot. It might be Kohl's. I'm not sure which one. And not make it any less than that square footage, because we don't want to render people non-conforming. Okay, quickly, hotel. Thank you for making some of the changes, but I want to point out something in the language. In the first sentence, in first paragraph, overnight shall mean continuous occupancy of a room or suite. It's not the hotel, so they can just move to another room or suite. You want to make a note of that every 14 days they could move to another room. I think you need to tighten up the wording, okay?
Okay, that's a good point. Before you get off that point, can you please, Mr. Newcomb obviously is gone, Mr. Janetsky, our intent obviously is not to have somebody just move from room 101 to 102. So could you please get him that comment to get into the wording, please?
Okay.
To a different kitchen.
Yeah, to different kitchen. And you know what? I don't have a problem with the refrigerator, microwave, but you know what? Some of these places do have full kitchen facilities. You really don't want full kitchen facilities if you don't want it to become a place that somebody's going to live. And with all due respect, because there's too many already in Monmouth and Ocean County. On that same paragraph, if you look at the wording, it's just a little confusing and perhaps needs to be changed, because it says for a period not to exceed 14 days and greater than 24 hours. I think what you want to put is for a period greater than 24 hours not to exceed 14 days. It just doesn't make sense the way it reads. The maximum improvement coverage, I really do think you should go back. Freehold is 60% total, and they have some really nice facilities. Maybe while you don't want to be what somebody else is, you really should take a look at at reducing the coverage, because I happen to agree with Mr. Brannon. It should be buildable acres. You could have somebody come in with 6 acres of swampland and 1 high and dry. There are ways to put it in. I've seen ordinances that have put it as uplands, as usable acreage, as buildable acreage, and I do have some of those if you want to take a look at them. On the wording and the very last paragraph, the first paragraph, Mr. Newcomb does talk about the accessory uses having to be interior, which is something we all wanted. But if you go to the last paragraph, he again repeats accessory uses are any uses which are subordinate to but related and customarily incidental to the principal uses, including the following. Well, accessory uses aren't necessarily inside. He says it in the first one, but then he adds the same type of facilities as well as swimming pools and retail shops. You really need, and exclude the swimming pool because obviously the swimming pool is going to be outside, but that banquet facility, restaurants, conference facilities, health facilities, retail shops, you need to clean up that language so they are interior to the building only. I can already see a developer coming and arguing, saying, well, these are accessory uses. Accessory uses can be outside, so I can still put them outside. That needs to be taken care of. Couple of things that I mentioned before, I would hope you'd go back and reconsider. Garbage and recycling enclosures and waste compactors should be interior to the building. If not, they should be highly buffered and screened. We also talked about parking stalls. I think somewhere along the line our parking stalls have been squeezed down to 9 feet. Most of the hotels, because people are driving big vehicles there, are 10 to 20 feet. They're parking stalls, and the aisles are at least 25 feet in dimension. They're also what is going to be require an off-street loading space. And I gave you some language before that up to 10,000 there should be 1, 10,000 to 25, 2, and then additional ones. And they too have to be screened and buffered. The other thing is that I found in most of the hotel ordinances that I looked at, a fairly large buffer of 100 feet when it was next to a residential property. Our ordinance doesn't have quite all that detail. I think those are a few of the details you need to go back and take a look at. And at very least, you should not be allowing stoves. A lot of these places do have stoves. You want to put a refrigerator in there, fine. Coffee pot, I think that's terrific. But I think that's probably where it should end. I would wonder if you really even want a microwave, because you can cook off a microwave. You bring in a little hot plate, and you really need to tighten up some of those other things. But you've made great progress.
Thank you, Ms. Feigin.
Thank you.
I'm going to mess up the last name, and I apologize. The first name is Stephanie. No, I can't.
Stephanie Kubo?
Stephanie Kubo?
Is there a Stephanie in the house?
Is there anyone here? That's a craft? Gee, okay. Okay. Ms. Elsa Wisner. Welcome, Ms. Wisner.
Elsa.
3. Hi, Ms. Wisner. Welcome.
Good evening.
Good evening. It's getting late, so I'll keep it short. Like Mayor DeBella, I forgot my glasses, so I'm trying to read my own notes. The first thing I wanted to say was, Mr. Chernecki, you are going to get a reputation in this town as probably being the best thing since Cup Red. If you can get this facade ordinance approved. I thought it was great what you were proposing. I think this town is long overdue in having something like that. I know I've spoken about it, other people have wanted it, and I'm so glad to see that maybe it's really going to happen. Now I would only ask 2 things. 1, do it as quickly as you possibly can, please, and thank you so much. And the other thing is that if you need anybody to go to Europe and check out some of the sites, I speak several languages, and I'll gladly go.
Venice, Florence, anywhere like that.
The other thing I did want to I guess I'm a little bit concerned. A few weeks ago, it was first mentioned that we do not have anything in the ordinance about the height restriction on commercial properties. I can tell you it used to be there. I don't know what happened to it, but it was there. It was 35 feet. And when it was brought up, I know that Councilman Walsh was, kind of jumping at the bit to do something immediately. And it was basically said it isn't necessary to do anything immediately. There's nothing really on the books and coming before the planning board or the zoning board, so we can have some time to review it. So therefore, I'm a little disturbed now that we have Best Buy coming in, and I guess they've gone through the planning board. Is that what happened?
They're in the
But they're
technical
at
review
50.
phase.
Yeah,
Is
I'm
there
on the
any
planning
way
board,
to-
I haven't seen anything
Is there
on
any way to
Best Buy.
back that off, I guess, is my real concern here.
That's not-
Okay, I thought that's what
I
was
think they
said earlier.
filed an application,
That's what Chuck was saying.
and Mr. Newcomb is looking at it to determine if the application is even complete.
I see. Okay, then in that case, I hope that we can come up
Yeah.
with something prior to
We
that,
absolutely need to.
because I would certainly hate to have someone get in
Correct.
in this lap period or gap
Those can be
period.
awfully long hearings.
Yeah. And then on that subject, I really would ask that you continue or go back to what we used to have, which was 35 feet. I agree with Mr. Czernecki. I agree a lot with you. That's kind of scary, but that's good. No, but I do agree. I think single-story buildings are not where it's at. I don't think they're making the town any money in terms of ratables. I think they're ugly. I think, 2 stories, we could certainly go in that direction, and I think 3, fine, but I do think 4 is too much. I think it's too much of a jump. It's taking away the rural nature of the communities, and I would hope that you would stay with 35 feet. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Wissner.
Just for everybody's benefit and to get it on the record, I'd like Tom to phonetically pronounce his last name correctly for everybody.
C.
Just say it once, though, for the
It's,
record.
Okay, it's churn, like churning butter, yet, like not yet, and ski, Chernetsky.
Chernetsky, okay. Chernetsky. He said it well, too. I don't remember it. Chernetsky.
A gentleman named Frank Voskoviak corrected me on the pronunciation of your name not that long ago. If you can say, never mind.
May I just,
I'll never forget that, the way you explained it.
I just need to, Mayor, if I could just
Please.
comment to Ms. Wissner, just one thing. First of all, we did send out a crew to clean up White Street, so that's been done, and we are talking to the Wawa people about internal controls. Thank you very much. You're welcome. And then I just have to make this clear, and this applies to every single member of the governing body. They told me when I interviewed for this job that Route 9 was very important, that commercial development was important, and that improving quality of life in residential neighborhoods was important. So I appreciate your compliment, but I will tell you I'm following the direction of every single one of these individuals.
Thank you, Mr. Chernetsky.
Litter in general has been another hot topic. The whole town is just littered everywhere.
Mr. Librio, welcome.
just at
Come on
the
up,
lawn.
sir. Please give us your name and address, as always, for the record.
John Librio, 35 Starlight Road.
Welcome, Mr. Librio.
Welcome. Thanks for the opportunity, if I should say for the privilege to speak up here tonight. Mayor, I first of all want to extend my best wishes for your mom
Thank
for a
you very
speedy
much.
recovery.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. C., great job. I was speaking with Juan earlier. I belong to an organization of classic car club in Howell that's based in Howell called the Blue Moon Cruisers. We run the cruises over at Chick-fil-A on Saturday nights. We just had our first one this past Saturday. We've come into an agreement with the Rebelettes through Mr. Cantafa, who is in charge of that organization there, and they will be performing at least 8 to 10 nights through the season at our cruises. And the first one is this Saturday night. So I'd like to invite everyone to drop by and see our cars and to listen to some great music and great singing.
That's terrific.
Over at the Chick-fil-A in the Lowe's parking lot on 9.
That's great.
Okay. As you all know, I am very familiar with ordinances in this town. And I was listening to what Mr. Newcomb had proposed to you concerning the stories for hotels. And knowing how a lot of our ordinances are too general and not as specific as they should be, there is a way for entities to use our ordinances to their best interests. And his proposal for 4 stories with a height limit of 50 feet, I think you better be careful. I may be nitpicking for a couple of feet on this, but I think it's going to work out to our advantage so that no one could come along and use this to their advantage. The average height of a story, okay, so if you're going to build 4 stories, make it a height limit of 48 feet or go 10 or 12 feet per story. Because this way, if somebody comes in and says, oh, all right, you want 4 stories, but there's 50 feet, they're going to try and squeeze that extra floor on there because they have the extra 10 feet to play with. You know what I'm saying? So you got to watch out for that. The ratables, I went from $1,800 to $6,800 minus my $250 veterans discount in 20 years. I've seen lots of ratables come in, and I haven't seen anything go down. So I don't know. I heard these ratables have been mentioned a lot of times here as to try and bring down our taxes, but I haven't seen it yet. As far as kitchens in hotel rooms, I've been to almost every hotel in Atlantic City. I've been to the Hampton Inns along 95 going down to South Carolina, and they provide refrigerators and coffee machines.
Nice.
The only place you see kitchens in places similar to a hotel room is a timeshare.
I want to
Like residence in.
just want to break my promise. I try not to take away. I don't want to take away
Go
from your
ahead,
time, Mr.
go ahead,
Rivera.
go ahead.
But there's one primary reason. I have a number of clients who are casinos. There's one primary reason there are not many amenities in those rooms. They don't want you in the room.
Right.
So there are some venues, quite frankly, where they don't want to give you a bed, quite frankly.
True.
In Atlantic City, I can appreciate what your perspective is on it, and they're all good comments. But in Atlantic City, they want you on the floor with a big cup of change.
Right. Okay. Pete, you were brought up before about the corporate center, that it's sitting up high and all of that. I mean,
Whatever it used to be called, Union Valley.
but you have to base the height on the building, not the topography. Okay, I know you, the way you, I don't know, I could be wrong, but what I got by what you said before, the way you said it, you were basing everything on the topography and not the height of the
No,
building itself.
what I meant by that is people are concerned about the height, but that sticks out because it's so high up.
Okay.
So, you know.
All right,
John, Mayor, that's another issue, too, where I've been in litigation. How do you measure height? So that's a whole nother
Right.
night, whether it's from the top of the curb line, the crest of the road, you're taking the
Right.
topography. So there's a lot of variables involved. There's height. That's why you try to look height versus floor. So,
That's what we gotta
but,
keep it
you know, we'll pass all of these along to
From sea
Mr.
level.
Okay, and I am concerned, in conjunction with what I said before about my taxes going up. The local school tax, I'm approximating the figure and I'm lowballing it.
It's time, Mayor.
It's like about,
Okay.
it's $150 for every 200,000. So I should get a $300 increase on that. And on the reval, I fall into one of the one-third system that they said that night here, where it's going to cost me about another $1,200. And that's not including the municipal tax and the Freehold regional tax. And I just want to, and the referendums for the roads and the referendums for the land. So I'm talking about at least a $1,350 increase by 2007. So please take that into consideration for your taxpayers before we,
Absolutely.
bond for money for things like that.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Libia. I appreciate your comments. Mr. Tony Esposito. Welcome, Mr. Esposito. Good to see you.
How you doing? Tony Esposito, 62 Crash Drive.
Good morning.
Hello, Tony.
Oh, yeah, it is morning. I'd like to say thank you for looking at the hotel ordinance and taking all our comments into consideration. One of the things I'd like to talk about is you were talking about direct access to the highway. Try and make sure it doesn't include access ramps, because that's the one hotel everyone was up in arms about. That's what they were doing, is they were using the access ramp to Route 9, which is actually on the entrance to my development. There's only 2 little side roads off of Route 9 into my development. You know, it's not a good thing. You talk about luxury hotels that can't be less than 6 stories. Not true. You have one in New Jersey, one of the best around, Scanicon over in Princeton. Have you guys ever been there?
Oh, sure.
Beautiful facility. How many stories?
Oh, boy. I think it's that
Yeah,
2.
there's
There's
different
portions
parts
of
of
it
it.
that
Yeah,
are
there's
1.
portions, but there's portions of it that are
Most of it's 1 story, some of it's
Sure.
little bits 2 stories.
But you have to admit, that's a lot of property.
Yeah, yeah. And as far as big pieces of property in town that could handle something like that, what about the old Blue Witch Junkyard site? And it's got direct access right on Route 9. It's what, 1.5 miles, maybe
There's
2
something being built
miles?
there, though. There's something already going in.
I heard, I was told it fell through the ShopRite.
I don't know.
Yeah, I had heard that it.
They have a setback issue. They have a buffering problem, believe it or not.
'Cause I was just looking on the satellite maps, and I saw that there was a huge tract of open land over there. You know, something to keep in mind. And you guys keep saying, you know, the height thing, and you keep saying the light stanchions over on 195, the 100-foot light towers. They're not as intrusive as a building that's 100 feet tall.
No, we
You
wouldn't
know,
call
it's
that
just a
100
small, it's just a small light tower. You know, it doesn't blot out the skyline. That's it.
Thank you,
Oh,
Mr.
and Mr. Chernecki, beautiful. I like what you proposed.
Chernetsky.
Thank you, Mr. Yeah.
I'll never forget that.
Thank you, Mr. Janeski. Evelyn O'Donnell, welcome, Miss O'Donnell.
Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Hello, Evelyn.
Good morning, we
Evelyn
should say.
O'Donnell. I live at 25 Casino Drive in Howell, and I'd like to welcome you without a baseball cap in our building. It's a pleasure.
I should apologize, I came right from
Don't
coaching my
bother.
son's Little League game and did not
I
have an
understand.
opportunity to
I
change in
have my
between.
children in Little League, but I didn't wear my cap inside.
Well, I
My
apologize, I was a little
question-
sweaty at the time, and it wouldn't have been appropriate to take it off, so I'm sorry.
My question to you is, I understand that this pig money is coming from, is that federal?
State.
State? Okay, then I'm really concerned, because a couple of weeks ago, you had told us that the state was, I believe, busted.
They are, actually. Yeah, the
So,
state will put on...
how are we going to get that $6 million out of 12 back?
Yeah, because the state has allocated $90 million that already is in the PIG fund. What we were referring to would be other monies that the state could make available. Unfortunately, there aren't any. In fact, the voters are going to have to vote on a referendum at the end of 2007 to determine whether or not to replenish the PIG funds for 2009. So there isn't any money outside of what we already have allocated to us as one of the PIG communities.
So that's a guarantee, we're good, we're solid.
We are solid. We are one of the
Okay.
PIG communities.
Well,
Through
that's-
2007, when
That
the
might be
when
one of
fund
the best
runs out.
things I've heard tonight. Okay, now the last gentleman just spoke about what the infamous ratables that we all look for in our community to bring down our taxes. So because I, like him, have never seen my taxes ever go down in the 50 years I've been here, so let me ask you, what reduction can I expect with the new hotel?
Well, let's talk about, see, what you said isn't actually true. Again, we're in the 40s, 42, 43 cents as a tax rate. It's the same as 1992. If you just did a cost of living increase from that, we'd be over $1.
Okay.
So your percentage for the municipality as a percentage of $1 has actually gone down. It's 11 cents to the dollar you give to the municipality. Meanwhile, the schools are 72 cents of that dollar.
I spent 9 years on the board, I understand
So
that.
you're in front of the wrong board to say.
Well, I don't know about that,
but. Yeah, I'm telling you, on a
Well-
cost of living basis, the municipal rate has gone down.
Well, Peter, when we are reassessed, I'm going to assume that we're all going to be up to speed, and then at that point, there should be some kind of relief coming from the ratables. Is that an incorrect assumption? As in, no, we don't see anything coming? Shaking your head?
We've had a lot of ratables come to this town over the last 3 or 4 years.
Correct.
Again, the municipal rate is the same as it was in 1992. Part of the reason for that is because we've had all these ratables come into town. The schools are 72 cents on the dollar.
So everything lies in the schools.
You have to go to the state to have them reform how they, it's not home rule at the state when it comes to Board of Educations. They control the dollars. You want that
I
to
know how
change?
that- I know
You
how
want
that
tax
works.
relief? Go to the state. You're in front of the wrong board.
But if we built a new municipal complex for 85 or 90 million, that would be really a foolish thing at this point in time, wouldn't it? I mean, if we were to do something
Who
like
said
that.
85 or 90 million?
I just did, didn't you hear me?
But that's not,
If we did that, say we built a new complex, but, you know, a new building. If we did something
Admiral,
like
where are you
that,
going with all this?
I'm asking a question.
You're not asking a question. You're
All right, then I'll just use my
what's your
public
point?
time
Get
as
to the
my...
point.
Oh, you're not being rude, are you, Mr. DeBasco?
I'm asking you what your point is. You didn't come in here just to badger.
Okay.
What's your point?
Well, my point is that I think fiscal responsibility is something that really has to be determined at a higher level than it has been.
Go to the state.
Go ahead, Ms. O'Donnell, make your comment.
Thank you. With new construction, such as a hotel, and I really don't have any clue to this, is there any responsibility to new businesses coming in with regard to roads? I mean, Highway 9 is 2 lanes, so that's really, no matter where a hotel goes on 33 or 9, it's going to be troublesome to get in and out of that particular hotel or business. Does the building or new store have any responsibility in terms of roads?
Impact fees are illegal in New Jersey right now.
I'm sorry.
To answer your question, we cannot assess an impact fee, for example, on a developer. Or if they were to come in and they're building a project and it's going to generate X number of impact on the infrastructure or this many school kids, under state law, impact fees are currently prohibited. One of the things, however, that the planning board has asked CME, the planning board engineer, to look at, other towns, I think in particular, Lacey Township has done this on the recreation side, is to try and develop a permissible impact fee where there could be a amount of money that an applicant or a developer would have to set aside for a road improvement fund by virtue of the expenses that they may bear on the municipality. It's a pretty tricky thing to do, and our engineer, in conjunction with the planning board attorney, has been looking at a legitimate way to come up with a formula. Apparently, the only way to do it is you have to have a mathematical formula that really does indicate what the impact on the infrastructure will be. So the answer is there isn't anything today that we have. The state generally would not allow us to do it, and we're trying to find a way to see if there is something that we can do at the planning board level. So when an applicant were to come in, we would say, we expect this much impact on the roads. You have to pay us $1,100 a mile.
Right.
But we don't know, quite frankly, whether or not, even if they come up with a formula, we don't know whether it will pass legal mustard, so to speak.
Are we at that point now where we might try to formulate something
We
in
are.
hopes that some kind of legality might
Yeah, that's
be
what I mentioned.
ensuing?
We are now. That's what I mentioned, that the planning board engineer and the planning board attorney
I'll have to start
are
going to
working on
planning
that.
board meetings.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean,
thank
you
you.
certainly are welcome to do that, yes.
Thank you, Mr. DeVella. I'm so sorry, Mr. DeBasco. I didn't mean to upset you.
I gotta
Okay,
say some
Nice
things.
night.
I'm not gonna say anything to her. I gotta say something generally, though, because there's a lot of comments that are made that are just so way off base. Look, in the history of Howell Township, the rate of growth of new home COs has never been as low as it is now. We're averaging 150 a year. Until we came on board, we were averaging 500 to 600 homes a year. As far as taxes, our rate, again, is the same as it was in 1992 from a municipality. We laid people off last year, and we cut operating expenses by 38%. So for people to tell us we're fiscally irresponsible, I'm insulted by that. You're not your turn anymore. You're done. Sit down. Sit down.
Hold on. Hold on.
Sit down.
I will sit down here.
Folks.
I cannot believe.
All right.
If you have
Everybody-
statistics like
everyone-
that, then
It's
you
my
should
turn.
share
All right,
them,
shh.
Mr. Tabasco.
Hold on.
Share them with us, because we don't know about these homes that you're talking about.
Folks, I need to ask for a motion. I want
I
to...
am insulted when people say those things.
I think you've insulted me.
15 at night.
And so am I. I have a job.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those
Thank
in
you, Mr.
favor?
Tabasco.
Aye. Meeting is adjourned. Everyone, it's late. Please drive home safely.